night.
Good evening. We'll call to order the November 1st, 2017 Public Works Committee meeting. Can I ask for a roll call, please? Here.
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 Commissioner Hecker has been excused for tonight. To begin, we have a motion to approve the minutes of October 4th, 2017 Public Works Committee meeting, and I so move.
Second.
Any comments from commissioners? Staff? Audience hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. Before we begin our formal agenda, I'm going to ask the township manager to explain some of the new wording on our agenda form so the public is aware of both our new agenda listing item and the wording in each of the items.
Thank you, Mr. Farron. Yeah, the two things that you'll notice that are different are the agenda item number. As you know, in the past, every agenda item number was PW01 or PW02. So every meeting, every agenda just had those same numbers. What we've done is we've extended that so that we can actually track these actions.
Right.
So if something was done, we know that PW01110117, we can go back and find that agenda item more easily, especially for record keeping or open records requests or things of that nature. And the reason it says consider as the agenda item instead of simply saying motion to approve is really very simple. The items on your agenda are for your consideration.
Right.
You may not want to have a motion. You may not want to take any action. So you're really considering it. And then after you consider it, you may want to make a motion or not. So we list the motion to approve final payment because that's the expected, but it's listed as a consideration because technically that's what you're doing. It's on the agenda for consideration.
Okay, thank you. Any commissioners have any questions or comments before we get started? Okay, so let's dive right in then. So the first item on the agenda is PW01110117. Consider grit collection system for wastewater treatment plant contract number 150. Motion to approve the final payment for contract number 150, grit collection system for wastewater treatment plant to Durstein Company, LLC, in the amount of $23,350. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been approved, or motioned and seconded. Any comments from the committee? Commissioners? Staff? Audience? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. PW02110117. Consider final payment for 1,000 block Edge Hill Road curb and sidewalk project. Motion to approve final payment to Associated Paving Contractors, Inc., APCON, in the amount of $3,741.51 for the 2016-17 HUD program 1,000 block Edge Hill Road curb and sidewalk project. A one-year maintenance bond was received. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comments from the committee?
Mike, I assume everything here has been inspected and
Yes, we checked everything out. As far as we know, homeowners are satisfied with everything we've done for the properties. Everything's been completed as far as the work is concerned, as far as the contract. So this is just the formal action to close the job.
okay. Thanks.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Spiegelman?
Thank you, Commissioner Farron. I just want to say the work that was done on these sidewalks is absolutely outstanding. They've been a huge benefit to this section of Ward 11 and to all the folks who walk one way to Copper Beach, the other way to the junior high. So kudos to APCON.
Any other comments from commissioners? Staff? Audience? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. PW03110117. Consider 2014 Capital Improvement Program Phase 2. Motion to approve final payment to Almeida and Hudak Contractors, LLC, in the amount of $0 for the 2014 Capital Improvement Program Phase 2. A one-year maintenance bond was received. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions from the committee?
Can you, the $0 payment?
Well, this contract's been around for a while because
Right.
Angelo's been using it for his milling processes through PICO. Their bid was very low as far as the milling rate. They were allowed, their milling company was allowing him to use that low rate. So it's finally been done. I think Angelo's finished all his milling process. So this, again, is cleaning something up from 2014 so that it's cleaned up for the books for the auditors.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So even though this is $0, we have to formally approve this.
That's correct.
Okay.
It has to be formally approved so that the auditors know it's been closed by the board.
Just want to be clear.
Yeah.
Any other comments from commissioners, staff, audience? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. And finally, PW 04110117. Consider Old Welsh Road Sanitary Sewer Project, final payment of $4,800 to N. Abinizio Contractors. Motion to approve final payment to N. Abinizio Contractors in the amount of $4,800 for contract number 149, Sanitary Sewer Project. A one-year maintenance bond was received. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comments from the
Yeah.
committee?
Mike, how are we making out on the contracts coming back, or the financial papers on the assessments?
We have all the assessments back. Only 7 people financed. The rest of them are paid in full.
Oh, we're great.
So everybody, I thought we were going to have a contestant by one person, but apparently that person did pay in full, so
Good.
everything's in order.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
Any comments from commissioners, staff, audience? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. That concludes our formal agenda for the Public Works Committee. We'll open it up for any comments from the public.
Laura Lehman, 1431 Bryant Lane. So I didn't get here in time for this issue, but one of the things, that it's not it's irreversible, so it's not reversible anyhow. But when I did drive past the sidewalks at Edge Hill Road, I think you all have heard me talking about the sidewalks at Rydell School, where the busy traffic is here and the sidewalk is right there. So kids walking down the sidewalk are right next to the busy road. One misstep or somebody bumps somebody or whatever, and that's how the Edge Hill Road ones were done. That's beyond me. I mean, you're doing this for kids walking to school. You want to put a buffer there, okay? Not put them right up against the traffic. So that's a concern. The other question that I have is, if you have somebody in Public Works who sees something that is untoward or not correct, is there a process in the Public Works process for reporting that? Does a Public Works director have a process that they've published somewhere in a manual or something for reporting that kind of thing?
I can't speak for the Public Works Director. He's not here right now. I would suggest following up with Commissioner Hecker if that's a particular question for him. Otherwise,
Okay.
I would suggest you can follow up with your commissioner.
Well, okay, and I think it's something that all commissioners should know. So I would like to think that as a commissioner,
Sure.
you would know that if your constituents had a problem with probably any department, that there was a manual or something as to where to go to report and what the pecking order was on that.
Pecking order is pretty simply go to your commissioner, and your commissioner will bring it back to the Public Works Committee if they're not on the Public Works Committee, and it will be addressed by the Public Works Committee at that point.
Okay, so you know that doesn't always happen, right? Because you've heard me coming to this podium for a few years now. So you know, and you know that sometimes the untoward thing is your very own commissioner, right? And you know, in my case, that's been the case. And
I'm not
all
getting
of you
into debate
have
with
closed
Mr.
your eyes
Knight.
to what he's done.
We're not getting into debate. This is public comment. You have 1 minute left.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the audience? Name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Dan Mellon, 228 Church Road, Commissioner, Candidate Ward 4. Question for the board.
This is public comment. We don't usually
Public
entertain
comment?
questions. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
There's a particular question maybe, but generally it's a public comment only.
When can I ask questions?
You can ask, can't promise or offer an answer in this venue.
That's all right, it's a general question. On our township, obviously running for this, I've spoken to a few people. been investigating. I was curious how, and by the way, our township had a very good rating from this individual as far as inspectors and people out in the field working, and he does not give that praise well. So I was very happy with the staff that code enforce in the field. My concern is, I guess, high-rise structures. We have several of them in our town here.
Let's say that again, what structure?
High-rise structures.
High-rise structures.
Which we have quite a few. You know, all high-rise structures are required to be up to PA UCC, IBC, and NFPA code requirements for 2009. Is there a reporting system that, as a taxpayer, I can go to and see that all our high-rise structures are meeting those standards before they're occupied or as they are continually occupied? Does anybody,
Manager,
do you,
is that something we can address in this setting?
I think the very simple answer is if you have any questions whatsoever about whether or not anything is being enforced, you would simply come to the Code Enforcement Department, ask them that question, and I'm sure they would get you an answer. And if they do not get you that answer, you are more than welcome to come to my office, and we will get you the answer.
okay, excellent. So it's a pretty simple question as far as international building codes go.
Mr. Mellon, can you please direct
Oh,
your
I'm
comments
sorry.
up here, please? Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, so that's it. So I had another question. Is the township currently, I guess I would say, in high-rise structures, when you issue them, do we get indemnified and held harmless? So if for some reason something goes wrong, and maybe that's for Mr. Clark, the township is protected legally from
You direct your
exposure.
questions to the chair.
Exposure.
Say that again, I didn't hear the last
So
part.
when we issue, say, a variance to occupy something very large and potentially dangerous or not, do we get documentation from the individuals or the property owners that relieve our township of any potential liability and exposure to harm, say? Most importantly, our first responders. As a general rule, because we do have a lot of high-rise structures. So my concern is high-rise structure safety and the standards that go along, and I will be in touch with your office, his office, I'm sorry.
Sure.
On those questions, specifically for that. And, you know, are they being held up to OSHA 1726? Do you know what that is, anybody? Section 1726 of the OSHA code?
Alyssa, is that something you want to address right now, or is that something you would like to follow up with the resident afterwards?
I'm not sure if I really understand the question.
The question is
I will say one thing about the OSHA code. OSHA is for occupational safety, health administration, for people who are actually doing work out on job sites, making sure they're wearing hard hats, making sure they're wearing reflective vests, making sure if they're on cranes, they're wearing harnesses and things along those lines. So I'm not sure how that would be implicated for someone living in a building. And with regards to the hold harmless, I don't really understand the question. I don't understand what's being asked.
So then I would recommend, rather than take up the time here, if you have a particular question for the
Yeah, I have
solicitor.
a specific question. So OSHA 1726 provides, is a safety standard for workers in a building, and as a company owner who works in these large buildings, I'd like to know that my buildings are safe for me, because if they're safe for me, then they're safe for everybody else. And they have to be adhered to, by the way. It's not an option, in most places, anyway. Okay, well, that's it. I mean, look, no reason I bring it up, and I'll stop, because if the public safety, if the health and welfare of our community isn't at the first and foremost of this Board of Commissioners, then what are we doing here? You know what I mean? So that's why I brought it up, was safety codes. So I'll reach out to Mr. Manfredi, and I will get those answers and talk about it again. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other audience members want to come to the podium on public works issues? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion to end the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Good evening, everyone. I am calling to order the Public Safety Committee meeting. We're changing order a little bit tonight, so Public Safety has moved up to second position, and I'm calling to order for November 1st, 2017. And can we have a roll call, please? Here.
Here. Here. Here.
Here. Thank you. And now we'll have a motion to approve the minutes of the October 4th, 2017 Public Safety Committee meeting. Now I so move.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Any changes or additions to those minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes have been approved. We have a number of, let's see, 4 things from the, from your office tonight, Chief. And so I'll just start with the first one, and then unless you have any announcements before?
Just a short report, if you would, Madam Chair.
Absolutely.
This past Saturday, we participated in the National Take Back Drug Day and collected 3 boxes of drugs that day, which weighed 86.4 pounds. They were taken to the collection point along with 6 other boxes we had previously collected, which weighed a total of 131 pounds. As you know, Abington accepts these drugs to be turned in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Just come to our records room. The only thing we ask is that please no liquids and no sharps, meaning hypodermic needles, and that's for the safety of the staff. But these are drugs that were taken off the street that won't be out there, can't cause anybody harm. So that is a good thing. As a result of an ongoing investigation into late-night thefts from unlocked vehicles, Abington Police Department issued an arrest warrant for 20-year-old Louis Capelli of Philadelphia. On October 27, 2017, Capelli turned himself into APD to answer those charges. If you want to read more about this particular case or see a picture of him, go to our webpage, abingtonpd.org, go to the press releases, and it is on there. And as always, criminal charges, any discussion thereof are merely allegations, and all defendants are presumed innocent until and unless proven guilty in the court of law. As a result of an ongoing Abington Police investigation, our officers working with DEA this afternoon arrested an individual in Philadelphia and seized 350 bags of heroin. In total, during this investigation, 900 bags of heroin were seized from this individual, and that is a lot of heroin that has been taken off the streets of Abington. So that was excellent work, excellent cooperation between our agency, DEA, and Philadelphia PD in this particular situation. Also, we have experienced a number of burglaries. Dale Road, Forest Avenue, Cheltenham has had the same thing in their area, off of Township Line Road and Jenkintown Road down into Cheltenham. These were mostly occurring during the early evening hours, dinner hour, if you will, and we are cooperating with them, working with them, and other agencies to try to solve these as quickly as we can. But there's been another rash of burglaries that you're probably aware of as well. And we refer to these as late night occupied house burglaries. These are sneak thief burglaries where the people are upstairs asleep, they leave a window unlocked, and someone slips in and steals items of value from the lower level of the home, never enter the living area, but nevertheless it is an extremely frightening thing. We have devoted a lot of police resources to this investigation, and I'm happy to report that we're making some progress on that case, and hopefully we'll have some good news for you in the not too distant future. But believe me when I tell you that these 2 crime trends are receiving a tremendous amount of police resources at this point in time. And that's really my police report, Madam Chair.
Do any commissioners have any questions or comments for the chief? Commissioner Speaker.
Just briefly, Commissioner Schreiber. Chief Livigood, first of all, outstanding work on those, the interdepartmental cooperations and the arrests resulting from them. And I want you to know, certainly everyone in my neighborhood appreciates your work on those late night occupied home burglaries. And I just want to point out that excellent drug turn-in program, whether it's on National Take Back Day or the ongoing program. Not only does it keep, obviously, most importantly, those drugs off the street, but it also keeps a lot of those drugs out of our water system, because many people dump their old drugs down the toilet and flush them thinking they're gone forever. And there's a lot of that stuff that is actually very difficult for Aqua and other agencies to filter out of the system. So it's a dual benefit from that fantastic program. So thank you very much, Chief.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Chief, thank you for your work for getting this heroin off the street, and I just want to say, or give a thanks too from the Angels in Motion. We really appreciate this.
We're hoping to maybe have blessing bag party coming up, so that'll be good. Thank you for your report. Anybody else? I'm sorry. Thank you for your report. And I want to point out that we have Rich Garrett from the Second Alarmers waving out in the audience. No report tonight, though? Very good. So we're going to start with the regular agenda. PS1 is a motion to award the contract for furnishing police equipment to American Uniform Sales, Inc., and to award the contract for furnishing police uniforms to Red the Uniform Tailor. I like that name, Red the Uniform Tailor. And I so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comments from commissioners? Questions? Staff? Audience? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. PS2 is a motion to affirm and, yeah, this one is a motion, to affirm and promote Deputy Chief Patrick Malloy as the Chief of Police effective February 1st, 2018, or whenever current Chief John A. Livingood retires, whichever is sooner, and I so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded by several people. Do you have a comment that you would like to make on this?
I do, Madam Chair. This item and the two that follow it are really part of our succession plan, which we have shared with you previously and we have gone over. We are making the moves exactly when we said we were going to do them. And it's going to make for a very smooth transition of leadership within the police department. And I can tell you from the people that we're talking about tonight and others that are in the pipeline, the future is very bright for our department. And I am very proud to say that these are fine individuals that we're talking about here that are going to really carry our department forward with flying colors in the future after I'm gone. So that's my only comment. And we'll be talking about this more at the full board meeting.
So I am both sad and happy about this motion. Of course, sad to see you eventually retire whenever that day comes, but happy about our succession plan. So, any comments from commissioners?
I'll just second what John Livingood said. I think that's a great future for Abington, for all of us. Thank you.
Anybody else? Staff, audience, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. PS3 is not a motion, is that correct?
That is correct, Madam Chair. This is more or less for information only. This is an appointment. It is not a civil service promotion. So we're just providing it to you for information tonight, and this is, of course, we'll be doing this at the full board meeting. We will be appointing Kelly Warner. Lieutenant Kelly Warner will be appointed the next Deputy Chief of Police in Abington. So we wanted to just provide that to you tonight for information purposes.
So to read the PS3, again, which is not a motion, but it's to affirm and appoint Lieutenant Kelly Warner as Deputy Chief of Police effective November 13th, 2017. And then moving on is PS4, motion to appoint and approve the promotion of Officer Joseph Bly. Yeah, there's a missing word in here. It's Officer Joseph Bly to Police Sergeant effective November 13th, 2017, and I so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comments or questions from commissioners?
I have one question. So we'll have two deputy chiefs for a little bit?
Pardon me?
We're going to have two deputy chiefs for a little bit?
Well, it will be temporarily because when I leave and Mike Webb will also leave just before I do.
Oh, really?
So that will open up another slot, but Pat, of course, will be getting promoted, as you indicated tonight, to chief. And so that will take us back down to one deputy chief.
I just wanted to see it share the same chair.
It's all part of this planning for the succession and the transition to make this happen in a smooth, orderly fashion.
And I understand that. I'm just looking at the dates. That's all I was trying to
Yeah,
figure out.
isn't that how it happened before, that we had two deputies with both you and Pat, didn't we? Didn't that overlap a little bit too?
We have had two at the same time before, and this will really give Kelly Warner an opportunity to work on the job and to learn, and so we're not all changing jobs overnight. So kind of just smooth out the transition. That's the reason we're doing it now, rather than wait until that works.
Thank you. Okay, so getting back to Officer Joe Bly, any comments or questions on that motion PS4? staff, audience? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And that concludes our formal agenda. Are there any comments about public safety from the audience?
Just say something very quick. Congratulations, about to be Deputy Chief Warner.
Here, here.
That's all.
Laura Lehman, 1431 Bryant Lane. So one of the things I'm happy to see, Deputy Chief Malloy coming in along the way, and hopefully I just had a good sit-down with him where he listened to a nice long list of things that need some improving. One of the things that you've heard that needs some improving, I still, for the life of me, cannot figure out why our solicitors are still not wearing a neckband. I like to hope after that conversation they will be. I like to hope it would be very soon, but I'd like all of you, all 15 of you, to please see that that happens. I think you know, they're reporting it in the newspapers, everybody's aware. We have thefts, we have break-ins. You can blame it on the opioid crisis, but how do they scout out our houses? They come around, they mark them with their flyers, they see in the windows, and they find out if you're home. So please do something about it, okay? And please don't keep listening to somebody else, just get it done. It's so simple. The first thing that I'm asking is so simple. On top of that, financially, those people who are soliciting, almost all of them without a permit, are causing us costs as taxpayers when we call the police and when the police investigate the crimes and so on. They're causing us costs, but they're getting away without paying them. I do not see them signed up. I just chatted with Lieutenant Warner about that, and I still do not see them signed up. So that means that every single legal person is paying $200 when an illegal person is paying nothing. You're inspiring crime that way. We have so many things in this township that are public safety issues. And Commissioner Schreiber, again, the fact that there seems to be no knowledge anywhere that I can tell of anybody that when there's something wrong, we know how to report it, we know what to do, and we know it's going to get acted on. And that is not happening. We don't have a partnership with our commissioners, with our police, in many, many ways. Not that we don't in some ways, okay? But it is broken, and it needs to be fixed. Okay, as you just heard mentioned, the high rise, we all know about that. Every one of you knows about that, and every one of you participated in having that be the way it was. And that shouldn't have happened. There should be a clear path when something's wrong. It gets reported and it gets fixed. And frightening to me was to see in the budget discussions that we're going to have less communication back to the residents, because it's the communication problem that is causing a great deal of the public safety issues. So we need to get that fixed, and every single part of it matters.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else have any comments? Name and address, please.
Nancy Marshall, 1916 Hilltop Road, Jenkintown. I don't know if I'm speaking as a citizen or as the executive director of the library, but I would like to thank John Livingood, Chief Livingood, for being so responsive to a request that I made on behalf of my staff. Our staff at the library has bi-monthly breakfasts. We talk. We share concerns. One of our concerns is personal safety. I reached out to the chief in June and asked him to attend our September meeting, which he did, and spoke at length to the library staff, answered any question they had, And not only did that, but Tom, I'm gonna butcher this name. What is it? Thank you. Is going to attend our November staff breakfast, talk about active shooter situations, and then even come back a week later to do a drill. Sad that these are the times that we need to do these kinds of things. However, wonderful that our police department is so responsive to a request on behalf of the library. So thank you, Chief, very much.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments from the audience?
Commissioner Schreiber. Let's let residents. No, residents go first. Residents go first.
Name and address, please, for the record.
Dan Mellon, 228 Church Road. So to follow up, safety. Commissioner Schreiber, I addressed our township solicitor as far as safety, for high-rise safety specifically. When we issue, did we receive, or do we have, certificates of insurance protecting our township and our citizens from potential lawsuits in case certain safety conditions aren't met? That's what I meant by, some of the lawyers I know, at least construction lawyers understand the term. I apologize for throwing that at you.
No, it wasn't me not understanding the term. Your question was very unclear, Mr. Mellon, and I still don't understand what
My
you're
question
asking.
is, are we protected legally against irresponsible building owners in our township? So if somebody, God forbid, gets hurt, the taxpayers aren't liable.
Yes, we are completely protected.
We are.
Yes, we are completely protected.
All
I
right.
can say it a third time if you would like.
No, on all properties. All high-rise properties, we meet all safety standards.
That's not your question. Your question is, are we protected? You were using language like hold harmless and indemnified.
So the,
We're not,
okay,
we're
well,
not,
all right,
we're not
I'll keep
responsible
it
if somebody
simple,
gets hurt on private property.
So, all right, great, so that was it. I just wanted to make sure we're protected legally if something goes wrong from, say, a bad decision that was made. I watched the video today from this very room, and I saw a very bad decision made, in my opinion. I think it created a lot of exposure and liability. That's why I'm bringing it up. So I didn't mean to use that term.
Well, you used it, but it's an incorrect term because we're protected. We don't have any exposure. We don't have any liability.
Yeah, that's good. We can get access to that, right? That information.
Access to what?
Access to the insurance that we carry as a township.
Excuse me,
Access to the
instead of
insurance.
having a debate.
I'm sorry.
and I don't-
sorry.
I just requested information then about
You
that.
have 3 minutes to make comments.
That's it, that's all I needed. So
Okay.
can I get that information at some point? Where would I go to
Right to no
request that?
request.
He's the solicitor, and he negotiated the legal deal of a building that I feel is unsafe, so I would like to see that
You
information.
can file a right to know request for that,
Excellent.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments? Commissioner, you had a comment?
Just very briefly on something that a previous speaker said that I want to correct. When solicitors are, when someone calls the police on a solicitor and they're found to not have a permit, they are fined, so they actually have to pay a fine. Yes, they are. This isn't a back and forth.
Get a debate.
They are.
Especially from somebody out in the audience. We do have rules around that.
Yes.
You are correct.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.
It is my pleasure to call to order the Abington Township Public Affairs Committee meeting of November 1st, 2017. And we are going, once again, a little bit out of order. We've been upgraded from the 4 spot to the 3 spot. Let us start with a roll call. Here.
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 Here. Here. All right. Moving on to the approval of the minutes. This is a motion to approve the minutes of the October 4th, 2017 Public Affairs Committee meeting, and I so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comments, corrections from our board?
No.
Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Minutes are approved. And speaking of that last meeting, I want to thank Commissioner Bowman for filling in for me when I couldn't be here. I understand you did an outstanding job. We're going to start with some very special guests. the members of our, we have our library executive director, Nancy Hammocky Marshall here, and we're going to have a presentation from the library board.
Good evening. I'm Brian Mays. I'm the treasurer of the Abington Library Board. We wanted to talk a little bit about the construction update regarding the air conditioning. So just to give a little context, in mid-July, the condenser broke and really paralyzed the library's functionality. It was something that needed immediate attention, and it ended up taking some time to actually resolve. We were closed 10 days in July, 10 consecutive days, and had to operate out some of our functions out of Roslyn Branch, which is only 7% the size of the main branch. And so that was not built to handle the capacity that was sent its way, but we made do. There were additional expenses as a result, and we had to bring in a temporary air conditioner, some chillers, some portable chillers, until the permanent condenser was brought in September. So this added expenses that we weren't anticipating for the smaller units. There was stalled installation once the condenser arrived in September. It took much longer than expected. It was out through September and most of October. We ended up turning away about 1,000 to 1,500 people per day that we were closed. And so some days in September, we were closed partial days. Sometimes we were closed full days. In total, it was over 30,000 patrons that were not able to attend the library as per usual through this ordeal. We also had to cancel numerous summer programs, especially programs targeted at children for reading and other things for over the summer, science programs, book clubs, the list goes on and on. So there was a lot of people, a lot of constituents, and a lot of patrons that were affected by this. The bookseller, which is our sort of the Friends Committee for raising money, was down. Their sales were down 50 to 65% in 2 of the months that we were closed, July and September, and where we were closed the most. So that's just some of the context for the issues the library's been facing over the last couple of months. We'd like to thank the library staff for their flexibility and their endurance through this time. It required a lot of patience every day from July until now. We'd also like to thank the township manager, Mr. Manfredi, for his and the commissioner's willingness to shoulder the burden of the additional expenses to the library. We'd like to thank, in particular, Commissioner Spiegelman, Kalinowski, and Myers for your support to the library that you showed through this difficult time. So that's the update we have for tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mays. Also, I just want to point out there one other additional factor that I know was made things difficult during the actual installation, the swap out of the condenser. September and October we had a heat wave, which was certainly unexpected. So I know that made things very uncomfortable. But thank you very much for that update. The library's in Ward 11. We love the library. I think it's safe to say. So thank you. Any questions from members of the committee or board for Mr. Mays? Then we will move on. Go.
I just want to give a shout out to the Roslyn Library, my community, that did a great job while the main branch wasn't there. We had more traffic than we've had in quite a long time over there, but it all worked out really nicely.
As I said, it's not built to handle the capacity, but we brought staff over, we extended the hours, and the branch really helped us out during that time period. So I agree.
Did a great job.
Thank you again, Mr. Mays. All right, we're going to move on to our formal agenda, which begins with item PA-01-110117. This is a motion to authorize the disposal/destruction of accident utility offense reports, copies of traffic citations, and complete and closed summary arrest reports from 2004 through 2010. Complete and closed case folders, excluding major crime cases, through 1995. Police employee overtime cards, detail invoices, K-9 sheets, payroll/deposit forms through 2011, and I so move.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Really sounds, I don't know if anyone wants to chime in, it really sounds like housekeeping.
Yeah.
Housekeeping. If there are any comments from members of the committee, the board in general, staff and audience. Staff or audience. Staff and audience. People who aren't me.
Laura Lehman, 1431 Bryant Lane. So Yeah, one of the concerns I had, we're talking about, is this the one that's the intersection? We had a lot of different things on this agenda. I don't know if I have.
This is about the destruction of old, the
Yeah, but
purging of old
traffic citations, and does this include the intersection reports and the accident reports on this one? So they're on here somewhere tonight too, right? So are they on there too?
I think that is all, I think it's all one set.
Okay, so.
I'm going to go with yes.
All right, so here's my concern. So.
Anything except major crime cases.
Okay. So, yeah, I am concerned. So first of all, I want to understand, are these things kept digitally and we are getting rid of paper copies? Because one time before when I protested, somebody said, oh, no, you misunderstood it completely. So am I understanding or not, we are getting rid of those things, period, or we are not getting rid of them?
I'll see if I can get an answer. Mr. Manfredi.
Many of those records are paper.
Many of those records are paper.
Only paper?
No, there may be both. Every record that we have is ultimately paper. So the destruction of the records are primarily paper.
Okay, and are we keeping the digital records that we have in those?
I would imagine those that the records department and the chief wish to keep or are required to keep are being kept.
Okay.
I haven't looked at every list. I trust the chief and his records department implicitly.
no.
So in effect, this was the same.
So I did not look at every record because I trust them to do their job.
Okay, so in effect, this is what happened last time, is that I said, well, when you're giving permission to destroy these records, even though you're telling me, no, you're keeping the digital records, you've been given permission to destroy them, so at any time you want to destroy them, you can, because you already approved the destruction of them, okay, of those particular records. So my concern is this. So intersection records, for instance, is one real biggie. We have a big, major statistic keeping problem in this township with intersections. And if I had to wager something and eat my hat if I was wrong, I would wager that it is so that we don't have a clear view of what the comparative intersection crashes are. And I will tell you that when we were doing, for instance, the Baderwood, the Wawa by the Baderwood, we had 3 different figures. We had the PennDOT figure, we had Chief Kelly's figure, and we had a third figure. They weren't even close to each other. And so I said, how can that be? And the answer was, oh, all the northbound crashes were charged to Jenkintown. In another case that I recently saw, because I requisitioned records that you were destroying, somebody asked for the crash records on an intersection, and they were given the half of the intersection, okay? So in other words, the northbound and eastbound traffic from this side of the road. It was crazy. And every single thing that I've seen has been different. One of them was 2 years, and you couldn't tell what 1 year's worth was, and another one was a year and a half, and something else was, oh, for the red light cameras, they calculated -2 months for 3 years in a row. It's nuts. What needs to be done is a fiscal accounting of the intersections. I know you're going to cut me off, but this is important stuff, Commissioner Spiegelman.
Well, no,
okay, this is important.
First of all, you're out of time. Second of all, you're not wearing a hat to eat. Third of all, I have actually spent a lot of time in the last year, 2 years, requesting intersection records, and what I have found is the diametric opposite of what you're describing.
Well, I'll show you the records I have so that you don't have to call me a liar. I'll show them to you. They're documents.
Your time has expired. Thank you for your comments.
No, but they're documents. Well, I didn't.
Thank you for your comments.
Can you take 1 second, please,
I'll talk to you
just
afterwards,
listen?
Your time on this comment has expired. If there are no other comments.
This is really disgusting in this township. That's disgusting.
Can I just say something here? I just want to point out for the record here that what we're voting on is closed cases between 2004 through 2010, so they're at least 8 years old. Thank you.
And again, this is routine codified paperwork. Mr. Mellon, if you could give your name and address.
Dan Mellon, 228 Church Road. Just a follow-up question, just really quick. Do we make a digital copy of these records and store them?
No.
before we
No.
destroy them?
No.
The ones that are,
No.
required by law are preserved. In fact, they might even be preserved in both digital and paper form.
Right.
But the ones that are not, no. I do not believe so.
Mr. Chairman, may I, for
Manager, by all means.
the record, since the chief is not in the room, as you know, there is an executive summary of what's in front of you, but since there are people that are watching this who may not know, and so that they continue to have faith and confidence not only in our police officers on the street, but on the people who work in the administration of the police department, I'm going to read the executive summary that's in front of you that they cannot see, so that people know that they know what they're doing.
I will
If I
for that
may.
reading.
Thank you.
Commence at will.
It is the disposition, destruction of these records in accordance with the schedule set up by the state of Pennsylvania, Chapter 13 of Title 46 of the Pennsylvania Code, entitled Retention and Disposition Schedule for Records of Pennsylvania Municipalities, promulgated by the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission. The request of the destruction of the police department records is the second part of an ongoing project. The project is in compliance with the Municipal Records Act of 1968, pertinent sections attached, which you do have attached, and Abington Township Ordinance Number 1652. On November 12, 2009, the Board of Commissioners authorized disposal/destruction of police department records through 2004. List of items/minutes attached. Destruction of these records is now complete. They currently have 95-gallon bins at the Public Safety Annex Building. Shred the contents of the bins once a month. We expect to need the bins through February 2018. So the recommended action was specific to those, and the previous board actions, 1989 Ordinance Number 1652, which sets forth every procedure that they must follow by ordinance, along with the laws of the Commonwealth that I announced.
I thank you, Mr. Manfredi.
Okay, do we have any plans in the future of implementing a digital system so we can keep records indefinitely?
I'm pretty sure that all newer records, I can't quote exactly how many years, but
No, I don't think we do. Remember, these are things like somebody going 35 in a 25. There really doesn't seem to be much need, the law recognizes that there's not much need to maintain these records in perpetuity. As Commissioner Schreiber pointed out, many of these records are a minimum of 8 years old. Some of them are as much as 12 to 13 years old. Some of these records are pre-1995. Appeal periods have passed. Any driver's license issues that may come up on most of these are passed. Any lawsuits have long since passed regarding accidents. So there's no need to maintain them. And just as municipalities have dealt with paper storage beginning to become a problem, digital storage is going to be a problem also if we just keep saving a lot of records that have absolutely no purpose to be saved. That's why the law allows us to destroy them after a certain period of time.
to do otherwise would be the municipal equivalent of hoarding.
It would.
Commissioner Spiegelman?
Commissioner Klein.
It should also be noted, I think everybody on the board knows this because we deal with Alf Reed and Chris Posey, traffic accidents usually are not looked at unless they're within 3 years or 5 years. I forget exactly the time frame. So any of these traffic reports would be long from being useful in any study of any intersection in the township.
Right, including by PennDOT. All right, there's your answer. All right then. With no more questions or comments, let us vote on PA01, today's date. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. PA02, 110117. We are going to consider the Montgomery County RDA request to adopt Resolution 17-029 of the Township of Abington, County of Montgomery, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, authorizing the President of the Board of Commissioners and the Township Secretary to execute a cooperation agreement with the Redevelopment Authority of the County of Montgomery. If the board supports the adoption of a cooperation agreement, a motion to adopt resolution number 17-029 would be in order. Conversely, if the board does not support a cooperation agreement, no action is required. And I guess this is technically not a This is not a motion yet.
That is correct. This, Mr. Farren, is a great example of why the agenda is worded the way it is, because there is no motion. There's a presentation first. If I may, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Fritschus is standing in for Mr. Nugent with the Montgomery County Redevelopment Authority to give that presentation, but this is a great example as to why it's worded this way now.
We will now hear from Allison Fritschus, the solicitor for the Montgomery County RDA. Hello.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Allison Fritschus. I represent the Montgomery County Redevelopment Authority. I'm from Riley, Riper, Holland, and Cala Greco. Thank you for the opportunity to have us here tonight. I have with me Judith Kratz, representative from Abington Hospital. She can speak to you as to the nuts and bolts of the actual project that's been done at Abington. As an overview of how this works, Abington Hospital applied through the RDA for a RACP grant for $1 million. They received that grant from the Commonwealth. So what happens is the RDA submits the application on behalf of the hospital to the Commonwealth approves it, and the RDA becomes the grantee of the funds. The state is the grantor, the RDA is the grantee, and the hospital becomes the sub-grantee. The RDA then enters into a contract with the state for those grant funds, and the hospital becomes a sub-grantee. As part of that contract, there's a list at the end of the contract of something they call special conditions. In order for the hospital to receive those funds, they have to submit all of the required special conditions. Two of those conditions are a cooperation agreement between the Redevelopment Authority and we call it the sponsoring municipality, whichever municipality the project is in, and a sub-grantee agreement with the developer, which in this case is the hospital, and the RDA, which technically just indemnifies everything that the township is guaranteeing and indemnifies the RDA for any kind of ineligible costs, anything that wouldn't be allowed, anything technically that isn't within the contract. So basically, the sub-grantee agreement is saying that they will comply with all the provisions of the contract that the RDA has entered into with them. So the cooperation agreement that you're entering into tonight, I will tell you that the sub-grantee agreement that we enter into with the hospital has a provision in there that says if there are any ineligible costs under the cooperation agreement, which in all of the history of the RDA there has never been an issue where there's been an eligible cost, the hospital would reimburse the township, and they have signed off on that. The cooperation agreement basically says that if there are any ineligible costs, if the hospital doesn't spend the money on what the state says they can spend the money on, whatever is in the application and what they've talked to the state about, it's an ineligible cost. Now I can tell you, like I said, there's never been a problem and there's never been something deemed an ineligible cost, so there's never been an issue. If there is an issue, the township is indemnified and the hospital pays the township under the sub-grantee agreement.
Thank you very much.
You're
Ms.
welcome.
Fritschus. That's sort of a lot to absorb.
Yes.
I will open questions first from the members of the committee, and then we'll move on to members of the board. Commissioner Glassman.
I just wanted to say you explained that really well.
No, thank you.
So there's no questions.
Thank you.
And concisely.
Oh,
Thank
wait a
you.
minute, there's a question.
Commissioner Klein.
So on the second page of the agreement, cooperation agreement between the township and the redevelopment authority, paragraph number 2, it says township agrees to absolutely, unconditionally, irrevocably guarantee the Commonwealth, so on and so forth. And what you're saying is that the sub-agreement between you and the hospital actually indemnifies the township from any of those clauses on the unconditional irrevocable guaranteeing of the monies being transferred for the grant.
That's correct.
And that shows up in the, do we have a copy of that?
I did send it to your solicitor's office. I believe they have reviewed
have
it
a
as
copy
well.
of
We got a copy of it. I think the administration got a copy of it. I don't know if they've been
I have
distributed.
extra copies if anybody.
Well, the next form I have is the RACP contract between the Commonwealth and the Redevelopment Authority.
Jerry gave it to me.
But I'm not sure, unless somebody else, maybe they didn't go far enough. Well, in any case, it's not important. That's the one I was just reading from. Yeah. Anyhow, if we can get a copy of that before next Thursday's meeting, and I assume our solicitor's office, you have gone through all the relevant agreements, including the sub-agreement that indemnifies the township?
We have. I would tell the board also, this is not the first one of these agreements we've done with, or been involved with the RDA. And it's a pretty standard agreement, and the municipality is protected, just as in the way Ms. Fritches has indicated that we are protected.
So I guess my question is, if there's this whole process of getting around this paragraph where the township is guaranteeing, and then there's a sub-agreement, what's the need for the township to guarantee?
We've tried that with the state. We've tried. They still require this middle step.
So there's no logical explanation. They cause the township to become guarantees, and then they give them an out? Or give them a vehicle for an out?
Well, I'll say it this way. That's our language we put in our sub-grantee agreement that the state has approved to indemnify you. I don't know what other sub-grantee agreements say, but we put that in our sub-grantee agreements.
Okay.
The state likes to work through the RDA or through the local municipality and not directly with the entity that is doing the project.
Right.
And that is often why they set up these grants. It's very similar to what we're going through right now with Edge Hill, where the state and the federal government are providing the majority of the funding for this Edge Hill road project, but the state likes it to run through the local municipality, and it's very similar to that, and the agreements are set up in such a way. It does seem counterintuitive that we're entering into an agreement and then another entity is completely indemnifying us, but it's the way they like to do business. Our risk is none, other than the time we're spending discussing it now. And so it's easy to move forward with.
Thank you.
Just another thing, I think we did get a copy of that. I had a hard copy of it. I didn't bring it tonight, but I did get it. I think it was about a month ago.
Yes.
Solicitor Clark, thank you very much for your explanation. Any other questions from members of the board? Members of the audience? All right. So do I need to survey the members of the committee to see if we want to make a motion, or do I just go ahead and make the motion regarding the resolution?
You can make a motion to put a resolution 17-029 on the November 9. We'll have it drafted, reviewed by the solicitor, and it'll be on the November 9 full board meeting.
All right. So then,
if you're so inclined. If you're so inclined to do that, or you could not want to move forward at all.
Well, members of the board, is there anyone who objects to moving forward? Or members of I should say members of the committee, I apologize. All right, then I will make a motion to add the adoption of resolution 17-029 to the November 9th full board agenda, and I so move.
Second.
Seconded. Any comments from anyone? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. And hello, Ms. Kratka. Very nice. Okay, moving along again. Item PA-03-110117. This is the consideration of the condemnation of certain real estate property located at 1100 and 1102 Old York Road, or considering the authorization of the purchase of this property at 1100, 1102 Old York Road, and I so move.
Second.
Well, if I were you, I would not make a motion either way. You should discuss whether you want to do evidence.
I too am getting used to the new wording. I apologize. That is in fact not a motion. That is a consideration.
Because you have to decide which one you do.
I moved nothing.
At the unmove.
I moved nothing. I moved people's hearts. Never mind. All right, so this is a matter that has been discussed in executive session. This is regarding the central properties that need to be acquired for the Old York Susquehanna project. These are properties located directly on the northwest corner of Old York and Susquehanna. They are the properties that jut directly out into the intersection. And there's been a long, very long negotiation to try to purchase this per the terms of our multimodal grant funding purchased this for the fair assessment, the fair appraisal value that we got on this property, and unfortunately those negotiations they hit an impasse a long time ago. Unfortunately, these properties, based on their location, are absolutely central to this project. The idea being that these properties would be condemned. When the township takes possession of them, they would be demolished, and that would allow that, in addition to the demolition of other acquired properties, would allow for the straightening and correction of the intersection of Old York and Susquehanna, and all of the many safety upgrades planned by the project. The other alternative is the most recent offer from the property owner, which is a purchase price that is $60,000 above the appraisal value. The appraisal value on these properties is $190,000, and the last offer from the owner is $250,000.
And Mr. Chairman, just so you know, Ms. Fritches is here for this agenda item as well, should the committee or any other commissioners have any questions about the discussions that were with the property owner or not.
Right. For those who don't know, we have entered into an agreement with the RDA to move forward with these property acquisitions for the Old York Susquehanna project. So, but by all means, people probably have a lot of questions.
Well, it's not even a question for me because I actually know the answer, but I just thought people that are maybe watching this and don't know the answer, can you point out what the buildings currently are being used for, if anything? And
the buildings are, I mean, to be fair, they're rather derelict, blighted properties. The commercial sections have been empty for a very long time.
so they're all vacant commercial
They're
buildings?
vacant commercial buildings.
And they're going to be used for road?
These again, the intention is to acquire these properties, demolish them, and where these properties now stand will be a properly aligned, corrected Susquehanna Road and Old York Road, updated sidewalks, proper ADA accessible curb cuts, upgraded crosswalks, bike lane connectors, etc. So that's what will stand. The intention is that is what will stand on where these buildings now occupy.
Commissioner Spiegelman, Ms. Fritches is here and can answer any questions regarding the discussions that have been had with the attorney for the property owner. But I think it is safe to say that we have reached an impasse with the attorney for the property owner, that the demand for the purchase of this property, as you've indicated, far exceeds the appraised amount. And I think in the interest of moving this project forward, if Ms. Fritches thought there would be some value in continuing to negotiate, I think she might have she would have communicated that to us prior to this meeting. So the proper course here for the agenda would be consider authorizing the filing of a declaration of taking, which we could have prepared for next week. And in the interim, we'll work with Ms. Fritches on who will actually be the one condemning and who will actually do the work. But I would think that might be the appropriate course of action at this point in time.
Commissioner Glatzel.
So I know they want more for the property than its value, for sure. So legally, what will our expenses be? As you know, are they going to equal that $60,000 or?
Well, I would doubt seriously that legal expenses and filing expenses will come anywhere close to $60,000. I respectfully, Commissioner, during the executive session, I gave the board my opinion on what I thought the legal expenses would be in this matter. I would rather not say them right now. I don't want to be in a position of sort of tipping our hand, and I don't want to be in a position of binding the RDA as they're moving forward on this matter, but it's not going to come anywhere close to $60,000. This is pretty straightforward. We have the power to condemn. We are condemning for a public purpose. We are doing it along the cooperation with the RDA. So under the law, we can turn this to a private developer to redevelop the site. This is a matter of not whether or not we can condemn, but whether or not what the value is. And those are not usually very lengthy court processes. If they don't agree with the value, they have a right to file for a board of view. Board of View, some of you may know, in Montgomery County, as in all counties, is made up of an attorney, usually sometimes an appraiser, an engineer. It's usually a simple process. It's not a lengthy court proceeding. It's essentially their appraiser, our appraiser. The Board of View goes out and looks at the property, and then they make a determination. So we're not going to get anywhere close to $60,000, anywhere close.
Okay. Commissioner Gillespie, thank you very much for that. That was a very salient question. Commissioner Sanchez.
Director Spiegelman, thank you. You did a great job explaining it. I did just want to clarify that you said they were vacant commercial properties, which is the bottom floor. The upper floors are vacant apartments.
Yes,
too,
yes,
if that
is correct. Yes.
really probably doesn't matter, but just to be fully clear on
would
that.
now be called mixed use, but now they're no use, unfortunately.
Are the apartments are vacant also?
Yes. And it also should be noted that these properties have actually been somewhat costly to the township, because every year, whenever we have a snowstorm, it ultimately falls to the Code Enforcement Department. Code Enforcement Department ultimately really to the Community Policing Division of the Police Department to get those sidewalks cleared, because they've been completely unmaintained, and that really is the case with the entirety of the properties. Commissioner Farron.
Thank you, Commissioner Spiegelman. We keep saying the appraised value. Is it fair or safe to say, and I would defer to people with real estate experience, is that what it would get on the open market?
Yes.
Or is that just, if that went up for sale today on the open market, that is probably the best price that it would get? Or is it something where the appraisal value is, $50 and the actual selling price could be $150?
Actually, they're lucky they get that.
The appraiser is looking at it and is attempting to determine the fair market value of the property. So we can then at some point offer what is known as the estimated just compensation, which will be the fair market value. And they are looking at it and saying, let's say we wanted to turn it into a parking lot. We wouldn't be appraising it as a parking lot. We'd be appraising it as its highest and best use right at this moment.
Right.
So the dollar figure that it has been appraised at is probably the highest value that property has. There's also, there are other advantages to a property owner when they're selling to a municipality, which ends up saving them money. But yeah, this is what it's probably the best that they could do on the open market.
And if we condemn it and go through with eminent domain, what's the compensation for the homeowner or the property owner?
The estimated just compensation will be the amount of the appraised value that we have appraised it at. And then if they want to file for a board of view, the board of viewers will make the final determination as to what it is worth.
Sure, okay.
If I can add, Commissioner Farron, the market has to some extent weighed in on this. These properties were at various points up for sale. There were no offers. There were no offers at the sale price, and no counter offers of any kind.
No parking.
What's that?
And no parking.
And no parking. and it's very hard to view. You have to park somewhere else to go view these properties. Commissioner Myers.
Thank you. Michael, you said that it would go to a board of view for a final decision.
Correct.
Now, if either side is not happy with that, can they appeal that?
They can indeed. They can appeal to the Montgomery County Court of Common Pleas for either a jury trial or a bench trial.
And if it goes that far, and a decision is made, then can the disappointed party again appeal?
You can then appeal to the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania, and if you're unhappy there, you can appeal to the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, although the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania doesn't take a lot of condemnation cases because they think it's best left to the Board of View that was able to make their determination, so.
And each one of these appeals would cost the appellant money.
Correct, correct. There's a slight fee shifting provision, but there's not a total fee shifting provision.
And would the cost of all of this, if it went that far, would that be under your retainer?
I don't believe I'm going to be doing the condemnation. I think it's going to be done by the RDA. And any of the work that we've done on this, any of the interaction we've had with the RDA has all been covered under the retainer. Everything we've done to date has been under the retainer, and I don't know if, I do not believe we'll be taking the lead on the condemnation.
So then I think my question is for RDA. If all of the, and I ask this because we have been through this before.
I understand.
And if we have to go through all of these steps, which takes years, as we well know, and under the new agreement that we'll probably be signing, will we, the township, be reimbursing the redevelopment authority for those legal fees?
Yes, you will be, yes.
So, is it safe to say that if they take it to the extreme end, the last appeal of anything, that we've gone more than $60,000?
Like Mike said, I don't see it, if it goes to the Supreme Court, you know, I don't see $60,000. I think that's an extreme number. Like Mike said, even if it gets appealed, you're filing briefs, there's not another board of view. I don't see $60,000, I really don't, but, I mean, we can always, we can talk to the township about costs and things of that nature. We haven't really, I mean, right now we have an agreement with the township that says, we have a cooperation agreement with the township that says that we will, acquire different properties as you deem appropriate, however that may be, and do different things that you ask us to do, and that, you reimbursed, our costs. We haven't discussed anything else in more particular than that, but I'm happy to do that, if that's a concern.
In our last case, we also had to reimburse the other party for their legal fees. So it costs us really hundreds of thousands of dollars in the end. And that's my fear here, that that's what's going to happen. And I really think for a difference of $60,000 and getting it done right away, than possibly going through years of waiting for this to happen, I think it's something that we really need to talk about and consider.
Can I just point out that the reason we had to reimburse is because we stopped the condemnation, not because of the condemnation?
No, I'm very well aware of that.
And I think an important point, which I don't want the board to lose sight of, is the actual acquiring title to the property will, without preliminary objections, will occur within 30 days after the declaration of taking is filed. With preliminary objections, if they decided to go that route, would be probably 3 to 4 months after the declaration of taking is filed. So you will have control of the property. You will own the property in anywhere from 30 days to, let's say, 150 days. And then all you're doing after that is arguing over the value on the property. I would also just, again, point out that you are dealing in a range, and I agree with when Commissioner Myers says just $60,000, but when you talk about what the actual value of the property has been appraised at, you're talking about jumping that up by about 33% or about 30%, and that's probably outside of the area of which we are allowed to go beyond an appraisal. The law is concerned anytime a municipality has an appraisal. Now, if you don't like your appraisal, we can get a second one or maybe a third one. But if you have an appraisal that says 190, the law doesn't want you to say, okay, but we're going to give you $500,000 for that property. They want you to be in and around the appraised value, and 30% more is probably outside of that area.
And I think another thing maybe to mention, Mike, is that at any time, this can be settled. I mean, if it goes to Board of Review and you know, you decide you want to pay more to get this done, that can happen. So even if he appeals to Board of Review, we can always come back and then you can reassess it and say, let's negotiate, and then he comes down a little bit and we come up a little bit, and maybe you make a deal at that point. So that's not off the table just because we go to Board of Review. It's not as if it's then going to end up at Supreme Court level. You can always settle it.
Ms. Fritches, thank you very much for that, making that important point. Thank you as well, Solicitor Clark. Commissioner Myers, your point is well taken. I do appreciate that input. Speaking now not as the chair of this committee, but as the commissioner of the ward in which these properties are located, and someone who's worked for many years, along with Commissioner Sanchez, who serves with me on the Old York Road Susquehanna Project Steering Committee. This is not a matter any of us take lightly. Condemnation, eminent domain, however you want to phrase it. Weighing the importance of this project, not only for this location, not only for the future of the Old York Road corridor, but also for the future of our other major commercial corridors. And weighing that against the most responsible potential and actual use of taxpayer dollars and the parameters of these grants that we worked very hard, especially Assistant Township Manager Waymeyer, in applying for and ultimately received. I support this action as the Commissioner of the Ward. Commissioner Sanchez, I don't want to put words in your mouth. As I said, you serve with me on the steering.
Well said, and I fully support it as well. And I would even describe this more as, you know, a kind of down the fairway condemnation. I mean, this is...
Don't say fairway. Yeah, fairway.
Not the fairway, the road. Middle of the road, because this, for these two buildings, it's really, you know, this would accomplish the almost phase one of the project, which is the actual road widening and intersection improvements. So, I mean, this is, you know, plain vanilla condemnation and fully constitutional, and I recommend it.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Sanchez. Ms. Fritches, did you have another comment you want to make? I did not. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were simply. All right. Continued comments and questions from the board. I'm going to go with Commissioner Kalinowski and then Commissioner Klein.
So is the representative of the property owner here? Or no?
I believe they're in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Yes, the property owner is located in Southern California, and the property owner's attorney is in Idaho.
I'm a little confused, I guess. My question would be to them, what's their intention of that property? Just to let it sit there and, I mean, it's been there for years, as far as I can remember, never being used. And
I think they're trying to see how much money they can get out of the board is my.
So it's more of greed than.
I think they're trying to see if
Not
there
what's
really
best
is a
for the township or the
negotiation.
community.
And if we go back to them and this gets condemned and they say, wait a second, you know, we'll take whatever you're offering us, that's also another possibility at this point. I can tell you that, you know, his attorney emailed me yesterday and said, we haven't heard about our counteroffer, and I emailed him back, I'm speaking through manager, and I said, I don't have any authorization to talk to you about anything other than you accepting our, you know, settlement best offer. I said, and you need to let me know if that's something you'll entertain again, and he said, I'll let you know by the end of the week. So there is, I'm not saying I don't know what he's going to come back with, but I'm hoping at this point he knows that, I know that he knows that's where this is going to go based on some of the questions he was asking me at the beginning, trying to get different information from us about what we were going to use this for and everything else. So I don't want to say there is still hope, but, you know, I think he's trying to see how far he can go. But in the event that it's either he's seeing how far he can go or he's going to be dropped dead on 250. So.
Did you say he's supposed to let you know by the end of this week?
He said he was going to let me know by the end of the week. Okay. Yes.
And in which case we could, you know, whatever we decide tonight could be altered with new information.
Absolutely.
I will say, Ms. Fritches, I concur with you. I'm a believer that there's always hope. But realistically, knowing how these negotiations have proceeded,
yes.
And I'll be quite blunt, there have been various attempts and techniques clearly intended to drag out the process. the attorney with which we're dealing, the one who is located in Idaho, is not the first attorney who has represented this property owner. It is not the second attorney either. There is a way to make this go on forever, and there's a way to make this go forward.
Agreed.
Mr.
Just
Manfredi.
two very quick points that I think are germane to the conversation. Keep in mind that when this was discussed in executive session, it was Commissioner Bowman who set a threshold, and that threshold and others. So when the question was asked about negotiation, I said, you're not authorized to go to that number. And we're talking about a $60,000 gap based on an assessment, but that $60,000 may be a lot less than $60,000. So if you're making your decisions about, could this cost us $60,000, that threshold of legal costs can be a lot less. So I don't want you thinking that $60,000 is a threshold. It could actually be a lot less than that. So in your thinking. So having said that, given the fact that a lot has been said here that perhaps somebody negotiating would like to know, I would suggest we.
Okay. A wise point, Manager Manfredi. Thank you very much. Commissioner Klein, you have questions?
So I think the $60,000 and giving them exactly what they want, even though we have a bona fide appraisal, is exactly what we don't want to do. And I think that's exactly the reason why eminent domain powers were given to a government in the Constitution, is so that the taxpayers are not held at gunpoint on properties or the taking of properties for public use. And I think sending that signal is the absolute wrong thing that we want to do.
It's a point that I know was discussed in the executive session. There is a message involved here. I concur with you entirely, Commissioner Klein. Commissioner Bowman.
I support the declaration of taking the property. I think it's essential to this important project. And I would just note that unlike the last time the board exercised the taking, it looks like this owner is not opposed to the concept of taking, just it's about price. So hopefully there won't be any preliminary objections. Presumably they'll just go to a board of view if we can't agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bowman. Commissioner Farron.
Thank you, Commissioner Spiegelman. Just a point of clarification. Mr. Manfredi, you made a comment that during the conversation and negotiation on price, they couldn't go above a certain threshold. Could you at some point start, in a sense, taking money away from that offer in the next couple of days, that every day we don't have an answer, we go from, I'm just going to make numbers up, $100 down to $90, down to, if the appraisal is $50, so that they understand that they've reached their max offer from us, and if they want to achieve whatever the most amount of money is, if that's kind of what we think they're trying to do, that we can start building back down, because if they wait and we do go to the condemnation, they're only going to get that amount anyway.
Respectfully,
can you work up and down that?
I'm going to interrupt, Rich. This is a good question, and there's a whole line of questions like this that are good questions. I don't think we should be having these right now.
To my point.
While it's in the open. I think if the board wants to adjourn into executive session and have a conversation about this, I would advise. I think at this point, the board or the committee needs to decide we're going to continue to negotiate or we're going to condemn the property. And then in the next week, Ms. Fritches and I will work on getting all the documentation together for next weekend to allow the declaration of taking being filed. And I would suggest that if there's some strategies that you want to discuss with Ms. Fritches and myself, we can do that either after the meeting or before the next meeting or sometime in between. So.
And if there's a revelation of any additional information,
sure, of course.
Of course, that will weigh on our decision for next week. Commissioner Rothman.
On that note, I would just like to say that, generally speaking, I'm very reluctant for us to engage in this process, but I think it's entirely appropriate that we do so here based on all the information that's been provided to us by throughout the process and multiple legal counsel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Rothman. Commissioner Myers.
Thank you. And Commissioner Spiegelman, you know this. I am 100% behind this project. I think it's necessary. I think it's important. My concern is the process on how we're doing this. It's something that just doesn't leave a good taste in my mouth. And I still believe that if, when people own property, and I think that Commissioner Gillespie can attest to this, everybody thinks their property is worth more than what it's really worth. There isn't a realtor in the world that hasn't had to talk down an owner to give a reasonable selling price. With that being said, my concern is the process. The end project has all of my support.
I appreciate that, and your point is well taken, Commissioner Myers, so thank you very much for that. There's nothing else from the board. There actually hasn't been a motion, so I am going to make a motion that the board condemn the properties located at 1100 and 1102 Old York Road.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any last discussion? I know we'll have to open this up to the public, but anything else from the board? All right. Members of the public? All right. Hearing none? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes. Thank you very much. That was a very cogent discussion. And Ms. Fritches, thank you. Many thanks for that. We have one more item on our formal agenda, and that is item PA-04-110117, concerning condemnation. This is a motion to authorize condemnations of portions of certain real property located at or near State Road 2034, which is Edge Hill Road, Section MGI, and or State Road 2036, which is Tyson Avenue, Section MGI, as more particularly described below, for the acquisition of temporary construction easements for the purpose of roadway and other public improvements for the Edge Hill Road and Tyson Avenue reconstruction project. Federal project number X064193-L240, Pennsylvania Department of Transportation project, MSMP 57865, and I so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I guess, Commissioner Zappone, I know obviously this is in your ward. I wanted to give you the right of first comment, if you want to say anything.
I've been working on this project for some time now.
Dennis, put the mic on. Sorry. And we come to a point where I'm pretty sure that we're going to be starting this project soon. There's a couple holdouts, and myself and Commissioner Gillespie have made numerous attempts at contacting these people. This project affects over 200 people. Myself, Commissioner Gillespie, and my residents have been waiting for this project for a long, long time. So my thing here is I'm not going to have a few residents stay in the way of this project getting underway. So I'm supporting this. I have no problem with that. That's basically it in a nutshell. It's long overdue. We need to get moving on this. And I want to commend Mike Clark and his team for really pushing this along. I mean, I can't begin to tell you how many town hall meetings on this topic over the years, and my residents are excited. They're ready to go. I'm ready to go. So at this point, I'm not going to have anything stop us from pushing this project along.
Thank you, Commissioner Zappone. Commissioner Gillespie, I know your award is also about. Is there anything you want to say before we open up?
Two of these are mine, that's...
Oh, okay, right, well, that's why.
Actually, no, and that's fine. These are temporary easements, too. I mean, that's just, we're not taking their property.
The 6 properties we are contemplating filing declarations of taking against are all temporary construction easements, which essentially, I know all of you understand what that means. It means that during the construction phase of this project, we will be coming onto their property, maybe having equipment on their property, maybe laying pipe on their property. After we are done, we will restore the property to what it was like beforehand. PennDOT or the contractor will go out, take photographs of what it looked like immediately before the project, and they will restore it. And they are all going to be compensated for it. And just so the board understands the magnitude of what we are talking about, of the 6 easements, temporary construction easements, one is 1,300 square feet, one is 748 square feet, one is 729 square feet, one is 350 square feet, one is 185 square feet, and one is 87 square feet. So as you can tell, with the majority of these 6 properties, we are barely encroaching onto the properties. We have gone through all of the steps required by PennDOT. As you're aware, this is a PennDOT project. We've gone through all the steps required by PennDOT. We've had all of the minimum number of contacts with the property owners and then some. Commissioners Zappone and Gillespie have reached out to the property owners. We have mailed, we have called. I think in the early stages, Mike Powers went out and attempted to hand deliver the packets to talk to the residents. These 6 are determined by PennDOT at this point in time to be non-responsive. And so PennDOT wants to go out to bid on this project in the early part of next year, and they need for us to acquire the easements on these properties. To Commissioner Zappone's point about not letting 6 property owners delay the whole project, there are 202 properties that are implicated, 202 that we have had to get easements from or have done permanent takings on, where we've actually taken part of their property. There are these 6 and a few others that are still outstanding, but we're working with the other ones that are still outstanding. PennDOT will not award the contract on this job until we have complete and total site control. So in essence, this multi-million-dollar project could be delayed because somebody who we're going to be on their property for a week, a month, or 2 months on 87 square feet of their property is refusing to talk with us and is refusing to accept compensation for that. So we still have the couple of final PennDOT steps. If the board approves this next week, we're required to send out a memorandum of law and then a letter to the property owners. We then have to wait 14 days after that is sent, and if the property owner hasn't signed the paperwork at that point in time, then we can file the declaration of taking.
I'd just like to add on to that.
Yeah, Commissioner Spaulding.
If we're basically borrowing a piece of their property, and we're paying them for it. We're giving it back to them, they keep the money, and we're putting it back the way we found it. So I don't have an issue with that at all. Again, I'm not going to have a few residents stay in the way of this project that we've been working on for a long time.
So these properties, are there any permanent alterations in the sense of, this is really for my curiosity, like there's a property that had no sidewalks and then it's going to have sidewalks, or?
It's major enhancements to that corridor over there. Okay.
But all we are doing on these properties is temporary construction
Storage of
easements.
equipment or
There is
materials.
no permanent taking on any of these properties. And it will be restored to what it looked like, if not better, than the day the PennDOT contractor pulled up on site.
And this project basically started as a drainage issue because all the flooding that has taken place in the storm of '96 and 2001 all start up on Roslyn, come down to Edge Hill Road, through Tennis, through the cemetery, and flood out Ardsley. So this was basically a drainage issue. And it's morphed into, it's many, many enhancements. So 2 surveys were put out by myself some years ago, and the majority of the residents got what they wanted. So it's a win-win for everybody. And I neglected to thank Lauren and Georgianne. That team is it's unbelievable. They keep me constantly in contact of what they're doing. It's unbelievable. Our appraisers that were on board, the whole team just really worked and worked until we got this thing where it's at. And I can't thank you guys enough.
So I think.
Oh, and Panoni as well, Karzai and all them.
I think
Unbelievable.
we'll now open it up for questions from members of the committee and then the board beyond that. Commissioner Schreiber and then Commissioner Kalinowski.
So because it's a kind of a somewhat different situation that we're just temporarily borrowing, can that same appeal process, if one of the owners doesn't want this, they could take it to court and appeal it to all those different levels, like in any?
They can. The law allows you for either a temporary or a permanent taking to allow to dispute the taking. So they can go through this process if they want.
And similarly, there could be various costs with that?
There could be.
And all 6 of them could do that separately, or do they have to do that together?
There's a little quirk in the PennDOT rules that actually works to our advantage, which is normally PennDOT doesn't allow you to do multiple declarations of taking in one group, but they allow you to take upwards of 6 properties at a time. So since we only have 6, we're going to be able to file this do this as one resolution, do this as one declaration, even though we'll be naming all of the individual property owners. So they'll all have to move together. So it's not like we'll have to be fighting 6 individual battles on 6 individual timetables. Because of the PennDOT rules allowing us to do this, we'll be able to do it. We'll be able to do it simultaneously. And again, I want to remind everyone that whether or not we're going to argue over the money, this is a government purpose. We are a government entity empowered with the power of eminent domain. So if they want to file preliminary objections, they won't last very long. We should be able to get them thrown out fairly quickly, and we will have control of the property probably within 30 to 60 to 90 days, and then PennDOT can move forward with trying to award the contract. So they shouldn't be able to delay this project. This isn't a situation where they're going to be able to figure out a way to delay this project.
But there would be costs involved if there was
Right.
an appeal.
Right.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kalinowski, you were
Okay,
next.
so what it was a comment and a question. The comment would be, this also affects my ward of Jackson, Harrison, Monroe, and Hamel. There's still flooding there, and as I talked to Tim Clark, doing this project will relieve some of that water runoff from Tyson and Edge Hill. I guess my question would be is, the property owners, the 6 property owners, have they not reached out, or they have not, no comment with?
They have
no
almost been
communication?
completely non-responsive. We've mailed the packet, we've mailed multiple letters, we've mailed multiple invitations to community meetings to come and meet with township staff. Georgianne from my office, Georgianne Fusco, who has, she's made these phone calls, they send property, they've sent letters, and as I said, I think initially these 6 property owners didn't come to the original community meeting where we were handing out all the packets. I think, and I know he's not still here, but I think Mike Powers went to each one of the homes and tried to hand deliver the packets.
And these homes they're actually people living there now. They're
absolutely, yeah.
just not responding to this. Okay.
I mean, we've knocked on the doors, left cards in the doors, and they just
Don't.
Do they speak to their neighbors? Like, they're not consecutive, like one house after another,
No.
right? They're different places. So do they speak to their, like, next-door neighbor
That's
who's
what they're
going
doing,
with it?
and they're saying, well, I got this much, and, oh, you got that much, well, I only got this. Well, I'm gonna go and say I want this. That's what's going on, okay? So they don't answer phone calls, they don't answer their doors.
So they're trying to get more money?
Absolutely, sure. So, and I'm not gonna have that, you know. And just, before I forget, I just wanna remind everybody that our next, community meeting is the 14th of November at 7 o'clock at the VFW.
About
So
this?
yeah, we have one of these every year. At the VFW this year, yeah, not the community center.
Commissioner Rothman, you have the next question.
Just a statement, lest anyone be tuning in for their first time watching an Abington Township Board of Commissioners meeting. This concept of condemnation and eminent domain is not something that we, 1, take lightly, or 2, regularly engage in. And I think it's important to note that. In fact, I don't even know the last time that we were discussing this.
Since either of us were on the board.
Yeah, so, and I think that's important to note that the commissioners and staff, and solicitors and their staff involved in this have done things to try to help the situation and not ever let it get to this point. And again, I think it's really important that that's noted. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Rothman.
There's other people that I didn't know.
Commissioner Klein.
Thank you. So, I've been on the board for a long time, and I know how much Commissioner Zappone and Commissioner Gillespie have been working on this project and how important it is in that area. Also learned about it through the TAP program that the County Planning Commission reviews for the county. So I do know how important this project is. I did have some questions, just a clarification. You mentioned that PennDOT allows us to flow the six together because it is happens to be under 6, lucky us.
Correct. 6 or less.
But that does that mean that they have to have the same attorney if they
No,
want to
no,
appeal?
no.
Oh, so they just need to, in the time frame of any actions going through the board of review or court stuff, all flows together, but they could all have their own separate
They can.
filings.
Yep. Perhaps I didn't explain it properly.
All right.
What it allows us to do is file it by one declaration of taking, so it's docketed in as one matter, so the timetables will be the exact same. It'll be assigned to one judge. It will have the same schedule that it'll move forward, so it's not as if we're fighting a six different timetables, 6 different judges, 6 different, so that's what PennDOT allows us to do here. So, but yeah, they can get their own lawyers, their own appraisers, their own, anything they want to do. They want to go out and hire an appraiser for 87 square feet of a temporary construction easement, they're able to do that.
All right. And like I said, I think, the importance of this project, it's a stormwater management project that has been needed in that area, and it would be a shame, or in my mind, that this politics should not get into this like it had in the past with condemnation, and I think that this is a project we should go forward with.
Thank you, Commissioner Klein. Any other comments from members of the board? All right, since this is a motion, we'll open up to members of the audience. All right, hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
PA 04 has passed. That concludes our formal agenda. So if there are any questions, Commissioner.
Can I just make one comment? I have to recognize the library board that's here. Thank you for staying for the whole meeting. I hope you don't think we made the room this warm so you'd feel at home, like at the library, because we did.
Too soon.
Too soon. Because I see you out there. Thank you for staying, though.
And there's a whole other code enforcement meeting that you could enjoy as well, which has very content-rich items. So we'll open it up to the public for questions and comments regarding general items under the purview of public affairs. Name and address, please, for the record.
Laura Lehman, 1431 Bryant Lane. So, first of all, Commissioner Spiegelman, we do not find that our solicitors are properly fined, and we do not find that they pay their just amount of money. And if you'd like to discuss that with me afterwards and get some of the facts, that would be good. I would be happy to do that with you. So the second thing, and also there's very little communication back to the people who are asking for that communication. So the second thing is, in regard to the traffic stuff that is so important, one of the reasons for not getting rid of the antique files on the intersections is because no proper stats have been done on many of them. And when the red light cameras went in, I asked for stats on many intersections and was shocked that they had not been done, because that was the only way the red light effectiveness was going to be able to be calculated. They still have not been done, and I've been given all kinds of excuses. We don't have the time or the staff for that or whatever else. So keep the records. Someday, sometime, that will be important, because what we saw is the violations went down and then all of a sudden they doubled. So we do want to know what the former ones were, and you shouldn't be getting rid of those records. It's not in the interest of the people of this township for you to do so. It's okay to get rid of the paper ones, but your motion needs to say that the digital records will be kept on all of those. And we are nowhere near being out of digital space. That is something that is so easy to store when you need them. And I've seen Mr. Mateo dredge up things from 15, 20 years ago. So if he can do that in paper, you guys can do that in digital with a search engine. The speaking rules I asked on October 4th and many times prior, if you would please have a copy out at the desk for people who come, and if you all would please know what they are. Have somebody make a summary of them and find out what they are, because you're changing them at every meeting for residents. I have several very important things I'd like to know.
You have 1 minute range, just so you know your time frame.
Okay, so Mr. Manfredi mentioned at the budget, I didn't have time to listen to it all yet, but he mentioned that there were things that weren't in the right places, and that it was very important to get them in the right places, but then I could have sworn I heard him say, we're not going to do that right now. So I would like an answer to that. I would like to know that we have all, I'd like to understand why we're merging our engineering department and our code enforcement department. Both of those departments have had problems. And the code enforcement department definitely. And they are two very different kinds of work. They're not the same work at all.
Justine, your time is up. If
Okay.
you could wrap up in 10
Well,
seconds.
and the third thing is I would like to have an answer tonight to these. The third thing is I'd like to know why Commissioner Klein is being paid by a township attorney apparently.
We're not.
Well, how is that possible?
That is not a public affair. Your time is now expired.
How our money is spent on...
You know what, you can discuss that with your commissioner or anyone else afterwards.
No, I
We are
can't.
not
My
discussing
commissioner
that.
is Commissioner
We are not discussing
Klein,
that in the purview of public
who
affairs.
must recuse
Thank you
himself
for your
from
comments.
those.
Thank you for your comments.
Well, who would you direct me to get an answer to that?
I would direct you to your commissioner.
My commissioner is the
Or
one
to,
who has to recuse himself on that
to
issue.
submit an inquiry to the office of the township manager. All right. Hearing no other questions from the audience, if there are none other, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I'm entertained. We're adjourned. There you go. Nathan, we all set?
Call to order the Code Enforcement and Land Development Committee meeting for November 1st, 2017, and may I have a roll call, please? Here.
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 First, we have a motion to approve the minutes of the October 4th, 2017 Code Enforcement and Land Development Committee meeting, and I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any comments or corrections, additions to the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. First, we have CE1. This is an item to consider waiving the permit fees, the Roslyn VFW waiver of permit fees. Mr. Manfredi, would you like to talk
Yes,
a little bit
please.
about this?
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, both items 01 and 02 are before you very simply because the request came in for me to authorize the waiver of these fees. Now, while both are waiver of fees, they're very different. There's clearly a distinction between a nonprofit VFW and the Abington School District. However, frankly, I don't have the authorization to waive these fees, and it's in front of you to do that. My recommendation this evening is not for you to make a motion to waive either or not waive either. It would be to have us establish a policy with criteria that would set thresholds for which I am able to waive any fees or not waive fees. And if the VFW, and they are waiting on permits to move forward, wanted to move forward, we can make an exception and allow them to move forward without paying their fees. So we can allow that to happen while we develop the policy. But I'm very uncomfortable approving anything that hasn't been an established policy by the Board of Commissioners. And frankly, I don't want to rush into a policy just so an $895 fee can be waived. And then, of course, the second item is a very large amount of money for the Abington School District. And I'm sure you'll want to have some discussion as to whether or not that fee should be waived or not. So I guess what I'm asking the committee this evening, they're on here in this form because this is how you authorized them in the past. If they came to you, which they typically did not, my request is this: a motion to authorize the manager to work with the solicitor to establish a policy that's in accordance with the ordinances for the waiver of fees and to set thresholds to do so, to allow the VFW to move forward without paying these fees because they are waiting on the permits so that we don't hold them up.
And that sounds entirely reasonable to me, so that would allow, so the VFW would move forward, and then with regard to the second item, you would come back at some point with a draft of the policy.
Ideally, the December, in an ideal world, we would amend the ordinance that sets the fees that does not establish a fee structure where you could amend your fee structure annually by resolution, which frankly has us on a regular basis assessing to see if our fees are fair and are representative of our costs. So it's a little bit more complicated than I'm making it sound, but I'm recommending that we don't hold up the VFW by collecting the fee, but do this in a more comprehensive way.
And just to give everyone, and I don't know if we read it, to give them an order of magnitude, the fees we're talking about for the VFW were, as listed here, were $895 for the building permit fee, a state fee of $4, and then inspection fees of $360.
Correct.
So,
And I can tell you, engineering is recommending that I don't waive the 360, but I think it's important to let them move forward if they want to move forward, and we deal with this later.
that's what kind of in this in-between before the policy's established.
Yes.
Understood. Does anybody have a problem with that, developing a policy?
I'd like to know what new policy we're writing.
Dennis, talking to your mic.
I'm sorry. What new policy we're writing? For the 18 years I've been on the board always authorizes the waivers. So are we changing that format? Are we making it new? I don't understand that. This always comes before us. It has been since I've been on the board. So why are we changing things? I don't understand that.
Right, I think we have-
That was not my understanding. It wasn't explained to me that way, Mr. Sapone.
Yeah, the board always authorizes waiving of any permits. I mean, the last time the school district came in here 9 years ago, I mean, it was for tens of thousands of dollars. And we authorized, well, the board authorized to waive those fees, but these have always come before us since I've been here, so.
Right, I don't know that would be,
Unless you want to have something not to exceed, waiving a fee
that's precisely the point.
$500 or something like that. But something in this excessive amount, like CE2, we should authorize that.
Agreed.
maybe I was sort of,
I guess what I'm saying is your ordinance does not provide for the waiver of any fees, period.
Have a number.
You mean it calls for the commissioners, we're not allowed to waive fees? Is
The
that what-
solicitor's opinion is that even though it's set by ordinance, the commissioners can waive fees.
We can,
You can, in the solicitor's opinion.
okay.
But there's no policy that grants me the authority to do so, which is why it's here. And what I'm suggesting to you is that we look at, do you want to continue the way it is right now? Because I will tell you that it's been my understanding that in certain cases, fees are waived that haven't come before you.
You say they are waived before they
There
come?
have been
And
fees
they haven't
waived
come
that have
before
not
us,
come
is that
before
what
you yet.
happened? Well,
And I guess the point I'm trying to make is, you're correct, we do not have to establish a policy. If you want to say that the ordinance stands as it is, you can do that. And that every fee waiver comes before you, you can do that too.
Yeah, that gives us a heads up as to what's going on. I mean, instead of the fee being waived and then we get in our package on Friday, I have a problem with that.
Well, the fee isn't waived, that's why it's on your agenda.
I'm just saying, if a policy was written and it was waived and then we get in our package Friday that it was waived, I just don't think, that's why we're up here, all of us.
I don't understand.
yeah, I'm not sure about that. There was something that, maybe like a threshold, and then something above it for like the bigger item to,
Well, you can have a not to exceed. I don't have a problem with that.
Right, that's what we're talking about.
you're not saying that it would not come before us. You just want to have a policy.
That is correct.
Number-wise. You're not saying that people would just come to you and you'd make the decision. You're not saying that.
I'm saying just the opposite.
Yes, right.
I'm saying I want to know what my limitations are. If the limitation is every item comes to you as this is, that's why this is here, because I didn't feel I had the authority, I need to know that. If you want to establish thresholds, that if
There's
it's a
no
permit of
numbers.
$1,000 for a nonprofit, yes.
Yeah, there's no numbers.
the committee that, how about other board members, Commissioner Klein?
So it's my recollection, to some degree the same as Commissioner Zappone, that we've waived fees for the school district in the past. But I don't remember really waiving fees for nonprofits like the VFW in this situation. I could be wrong. I don't remember every action that the board has taken. I do remember the school district distinctly. Nonprofits, they don't pay property taxes. I mean, we expend staff time to do inspections and reviews, I believe the nonprofits should still be paying fees. In my mind, if we're going to create a policy, I don't think that should be waived for nonprofits. The school district, as I think it said in our packet, there is some logic to it, because if we charge the school district fees, all it is just recirculating tax dollar money. And so whether we pay for it or not. My only comment to the school district fee is you have this $10,000 escrow for staff review time. My question's going to be, are there going to be any reimbursables outside of staff review? Are we going to bring, excuse me, I assume this is for the high school project? Is that what this is for?
Yes.
So is there going to be any reviews that we're going to bring from the outside, whether it be traffic engineers, any other type of engineers, other than our staff review, other than the staff time that we're already in our budget? Do you have any anticipation of that? Because if there were going to be outside
Yes, there
payments
will.
made, then I would not want that to be waived. That should still be paid. Those are my opinions in this whole thing. I agree. I'm glad you brought this in front of us, and I don't think we should be waiving the fees for the VFW. And as far as the school district is concerned, I just had one other comment. I don't think we should waive any fees that we may have to pay for outside consultants, like a traffic engineer or something like that. If it's staff time, I get it. I would like to know, have there been any fees that the township has paid in the past so many years to the school district? Because I know at one point there was an issue where there was a potential of us being charged to use the auditorium. I believe, and I may be wrong about this, it was during the Baderwood Shopping Center hearings. I remember something like that. I don't know if it ever occurred. And I want to get some clarity, because not that I want to play tit for tat, but it should be clear that if we're going to be waiving fees, that the expectation is that the school board is not charging the township for fees when we're using it for public use also.
And the initial questions when I started asking was, apparently in the past, for recreation programs, for use of facility, those fees were charged, but that hasn't happened in recent years. But I haven't spoken with every department yet.
So if we can follow up on that before I'd like to make sure that policy is understood from the school board and the school district at the same time before we would take action on any of this. So, would be my opinion. That's all I got to say about that.
Yes, I agree with the township manager that we should entertain a motion to have the township manager and the solicitor establish a policy.
Yeah.
So then we don't get into this debate moving forward.
Can I,
Let's go.
just a question. The 24-hour relay, do we have to pay to use, do you know, since you're on that committee down there, Commissioner Kalinowski?
Yes.
You have to pay?
Yes. There are some fees. Come with that.
But that's capped, those are charged
pays
capped?
that, Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Commissioner Schreiber, Commissioner Schreiber,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
The, not the first one about the VFW, but not about that specifically, nonprofits in general. I would like some kind of guideline. If it's going to come up to us, which nonprofits do qualify, which don't, because I think you might have said this to me, but somebody said it to me. If Blue Cross Blue Shield is a nonprofit, are we going to waive their fees in the future?
Right.
That was our
Is it going to be
discussion.
every single nonprofit? Like, we need to have
And
more
that's the point.
clarity. Yeah.
That's the point of establishing a policy.
Yeah. So whether it's coming to your desk or our desk.
Correct.
Yeah.
Under what circumstances are fees to be waived?
Okay.
Right.
And to whom and by whom?
So, Mr. Manfredi, you sort of alluded that this may hold up the VFW, or would they be?
No, what I'm suggesting is the VFW, according to Mr. Pennical, is waiting for the issuance of the permits. So if the board is inclined to move forward with some policy that establishes which nonprofits, so that you have a clear policy that's legally defensible on when you're making those decisions, rather than incrementally or perhaps arbitrarily or capriciously, that there's a policy behind it. In this particular case, if there's no objection, we will allow the VFW to proceed through the permit process and deal with the permit fees at a later date.
So if we ultimately were to decide...
So you don't hold them up while we reveal this. Or if you wanted to waive it, you can.
But if we decided ultimately within the policy that they weren't to be exempt from the fees, then they would just owe that at a later date.
Correct. And they would have to have that understanding that they're proceeding at their own risk.
Comments from anyone on this side? Anything?
You come back, and then you come back and say,
I think I'm comfortable with it, as you stated. I don't know.
Excuse me, Ben, could you speak into the mic?
I'm sorry, dropping my voice. I think I'm comfortable with it, as you stated, Mr. Manfredi. I'm not sure if others are, but so I would make a motion to direct you to develop the policy along with Solicitor Clark, and at the same time to allow the VFW to
Proceed with their permits.
And, you know, we will see where the policy comes out as to their exemption.
With the understanding that if they owe them in the future, they would have to pay them.
Does that need to be seconded?
What's that? Yeah.
Does that need to be seconded?
It does.
All right.
Yeah. So moved and
Second.
seconded. Any further comments on that? It's not appropriate at the moment. Commissioner
So
Cole.
I gotta, just to clarify, so we're gonna allow them to proceed with the permits, but the policy may actually put them in a situation where they actually have to pay for the permits later on down the road.
Yeah.
I think what I had said was that if it is the committee and if next week the board's inclination to develop a policy and they were not inclined to hold up the VFW, to allow them to proceed with their permits, conditioned upon the understanding that if the fee is not ultimately waived by the board, that they would have to pay those fees, but it would not hold them up in proceeding.
Understood. Okay. And we're only dealing with CE1 here.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Comments from the audience?
Laura Lehman, 1431 Bryant Lane, absolutely not. That is absolutely 100% where the corruption happens in our budgets, in our lives. You're basically deciding certain residents, certain businesses, or certain nonprofits will be treated differently than other residents, other businesses, and other nonprofits. You're taking our money and making a donation, which I am fully planning to protest all donations and gifts that come. I would like to have my money in my pocket and give the gifts to the people that I want to support. I am not interested in giving them to the township and having you decide who I should support. You have the right to tax me as much as you want. And that's what you're doing. You had at one point $19 million more than you needed to have. And that is absolutely wrong. So to Mr. Klein's point, where the money is just recirculating, no, it's not just recirculating. The school project looks like it's $11,000 less than it actually is. In the meantime, that $11,000 is still coming from the taxpayers' pockets. They are paying the staff and all of the work that the $11,000 cost. And so what happens is we don't have a budget line at the township that says school waiver, so they can't see it over here. And over here, the actual project, to Mr. Manfredi's point, if you put the money somewhere else, you can't see what a project costs and what your expenses are. So that's where all the boondoggles are happening, everywhere, in that kind of stuff. The answer to this is no waivers. Everyone is treated the same. If you want to let them start and pay it a little bit later, that's one thing, but no waivers. I do not want my money going to a gift, and I do not want my budget messed up because you're doing it this way. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Good evening.
Hi.
Your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Kathy Gauthier. I live at 1331 Birchwood Avenue in Roslyn. I think the VFW, you know, for the veterans, I think it's something you should consider waiving because, one, they're vets. Two, they use it for the community. We go there almost every year for after the Memorial Day parade. And the inside is rather small, so it would be nice if they had a gazebo and that you waived the fee for something so small like that, or at least, you know, waive half of it, because they put their lives on the line for our country in the past. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think that,
Could you put your name and address?
my name is
for the
Walter Draving, 1431 Bryant Lane, Meadowbrook, PA.
Thank you.
I am a veteran of foreign wars, and I still think that groups such as the VFW or the hospital or the school or whoever should contribute their, you know, what it costs to do these projects that they want to do. I mean, a homeowner, I mean, I can't consider myself a nonprofit and come here and say, you know, well, I'm retired, I want you to waive the fees that are going to be incurred as a result of me building an addition on my house. You know, so I don't see why the VFW or any other group should be able to, you know, waive fees that are, you know, that cause the township to spend money to, you know, to respond to those fees. So that's my opinion.
Thank you for your comments. I think many of us agree with you, and that's why we want to expound on this in the policy and really sharpen it up now.
I mean, come on, you said the same thing 3 times.
No, but the analysis in your papers said that if you waive this for the school, they also expect they will come back and ask you to waive plumbers and electricians and everything.
We're not even on that item.
We read our
Thank you.
So we are going to vote on the motion to develop the policy.
Okay, so we're not voting yet. We're just
Motion to develop a policy, just to refresh, and to allow the VFW to move forward with the understanding that if the policy or ultimately the board does not grant the fee waiver, they may have to pay
They
it.
may pay.
Now, if we do that, they're going to know that if we don't, they have to pay the money.
Right.
Project's done, they get a letter say, well, the board did not waive this, you have to pay the $800, $900, whatever.
Mr. Penical is
They'll be
here, and I'm sure he
notified,
heard
right?
very clearly
Okay.
that before he releases it, he's going to have to make sure they understand that. Right. We will not issue a final CO.
Okay.
So all those in favor of the motion as stated?
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries. And then I would suggest, based on that discussion, which somewhat incorporated CE2, which was a fee waiver for the school district, we alter that. I mean, we're already going to proceed in developing the policy, so we don't need a motion for that, but that we table this until we can apply the policy to that. Is that?
And just so I'm clear, because we are in the process, and we are meeting with them, and there are professionals to make sure the traffic issues are addressed, do we continue to allow those professionals to meet, knowing that there's a possibility that those fees may not be waived? Or do we just keep it, just run a tab and make them aware that they may have to pay those fees, just like the VFW?
Same thing.
Same principle
I think
applies.
we're going to have to treat them exactly the same.
Okay. I just want everyone to understand, as well as me.
I may have muddied that in my original statement, but treating it as exactly the same as CE1.
So what are we saying? We're going to allow them to he left.
They're proceeding at
The
their own
permitting
risk.
process, we're going to allow them, are we going to actually allow them to begin this work?
This isn't permits, this is just going through the land development review process.
You're just meeting with people, right?
Correct.
Okay, nothing's going to start.
And we're incurring professional fees, that's all.
Okay.
Okay. Any comments from the broader group? Comments from the audience? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion Anyone opposed? Motion carries. All right. The first of two requests to consider text amendments. The first is CE3, whether to consider a request for zoning ordinance number 2145, text amendment by High Top Real Estate Group. And if I may, Mr. Manfredi, I know you have discussed doing this slightly differently, or having the board do this slightly differently, and you'll jump in if I misstate any of this. But at the moment, we are technically considering whether to move forward with this request by the applicant for a text amendment. And assuming that we do that, we will make a motion to advertise, which would be the next step in the process, to advertise the ordinance. Typically, that would then, we'd have met in committee, advertise the ordinance, and then that would then go to the planning commission for their review and come back to the full board for consideration at their, one of the regular meetings with enough time to advertise. In this instance, they've been to the planning commission. I guess there was some urgency, so they've had the planning commission review. But for example, for CE4, they would go to the planning commission next if we decide
After.
they're worthy to move forward, and then we're going to advertise it. Did I state that correctly?
You did, and if I could just,
Please.
as you all know, you've been doing this a long time, amendments to the map, the zoning map, and to the zoning ordinance are legislative. And it is completely at your discretion if you even want to consider a map amendment or a text amendment. You do not have to grant a hearing. In fact, you changed your ordinance to reflect what the municipality's planning code says, which is that, to do that. In the first case before you, the applicant went to the planning commission prior to coming to you, and it was made clear that the understanding was that that does not mean that the process has been altered or that there's any vested right in that it is still completely up to the Board of Commissioners if they wish to consider a text or map amendment. In this case, it's a text amendment. So just to be clear, the process has to start with you on a text amendment before it goes through any other review or any other board or commission. In this particular case, because it was kind of in the pipeline before, they went to the planning commission, and now they're back before you. But that does not mean that just because we're at the planning commission, you have to even grant the text amendment. You do not have to have a motion to approve the text amendment. You do not have to deny it. You do not have to do anything. And I will turn to the solicitor to make sure that I haven't said anything that's inaccurate.
You have not.
Okay.
Any questions on that process from commissioners? It's a little bit different, slightly different than what we've been doing in the past. Okay, well, I believe we have the applicant, and to that end, they will make a brief presentation on the what the project is, so that we may consider all of what we just said. Good evening, Ms. Yarnoff, and your name and address for the
Good
record.
evening, Denise Yarnoff. I'm an attorney at Riley, Wright, Berholland, and Collegreco, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant. And as you're aware, we're before you for an ordinance amendment, which would help implement a redevelopment project on Old York Road. And we'll show you a little bit more about where the particular property is located and what's being proposed for that property. But the ordinance would basically tweak your existing ordinance, which currently does allow for apartment use in this district, but at a much lesser density and at a density that would really not make development of the property very feasible. Again, if you're familiar at all with the property, it's at 1640-46 Old York Road. It's next to the Lee's Hoagie. It's a property that's been basically underutilized for a long period of time. There's an office building on the property, and the owners of the property have attempted to lease the property, redevelop the property, reuse the property for a long period of time to really no avail. And so they're before you tonight to discuss whether it makes sense to amend the ordinance in such a way that would allow for an apartment building with slightly or with greater density than what the ordinance would currently allow. So what I wanted to do is introduce you to the applicant, David Landsgarner. It's his family is the owner of the property, and he'll tell you a little bit more about that. And then we can show you more from the architect as to what the project would look like. And then we can go through the ordinance that we have drafted and show you what changes we wanted to make to your existing ordinance. And what I handed out to you earlier before the meeting is the ordinance which we actually submitted, but we made changes to that ordinance based upon comments that we received from your township solicitor, your township manager, your township zoning officer, some comments from the planning commission, as well as comments from the county planning commission. So we made a whole number of changes, which is what I gave to you, and you can see all that in red line. And then as I go through it, when we get to that, I can point out what all those changes are.
I wanted to make a comment before we begin.
If I may interrupt you for a minute.
No, I think you're at the transition point, right, Denise?
I'm the zoning attorney.
No, you're going to pivot to David.
Oh, yes,
now,
I'm going
right?
to pivot to
Okay,
to
so
David.
before that happens, I just wanted to make a few comments. Are we at the right time?
Commissioner Hecker, please.
Okay, thank you. So to put this in context, conversations about the redevelopment of this site have been ongoing pretty much for the duration of my tenure on the board. Original conversations started with a project that was of even much greater density than what you'll see tonight. Not surprisingly, the nearby residents had a strong negative reaction to the size and scale of the project through a series of local meetings that we held. And through that exchange, the developers made changes to the proposed structure. And one of the other considerations from the residents was concerns about parking and whether there would be sufficient parking to accommodate the number of units. And you'll see as part of the proposal, this development is linked to a second property on Old York Road, which would be part of the project and would be ancillary parking for residents and visitors. And so we've probably held four community meetings over the last year and a half. None recently, and if this is to go forward, I will be doing so over the next month to update the residents about the mechanism here. And so I think through this, where I got to was it is appropriate for the project at this point to receive a review by the board, based on the work. And so there are two considerations before us. One is your view of the project and how it fits within the scope of the Old York Road corridor. And the second is the mechanism, which Denise had just mentioned. So the discussion about this project kind of crossed zoning ordinance time zones. And so when the discussion began, we were operating under one zoning ordinance. And as it moved forward, we passed the new ordinance earlier in the spring, which had ramifications for any discussion about how this might move forward. So, we'll be considering both the merits of the project and then what's before us in terms of a mechanism for how that could be achieved. So I'll be interested to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Commissioner Hecker. And please.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to have David tell you a little bit about himself, his business, his vision for this property, and a little bit more of the history, consistent with what Commissioner Hecker just mentioned. There's been a long history and a lot of time that has been spent by Commissioner Hecker, which we're very appreciative of, as well as the township staff over the last couple of years, which has led us finally to this point to be before you tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, Dave Landsgarner. I'm the owner and founder of High Top Real Estate and Development. We're a family-owned real estate development company operating in the greater Philadelphia area. My father-in-law, Ricky Liss, is a longtime Abington resident. He's owned this parcel for probably the past 20 to 25 years. He acquired one after another, and then it became 3 contiguous parcels on Old York Road. Throughout this past 5 or 6 years, we've been trying to market the property for lease commercially, to try and get some retail activity on Old York Road. As all of you know, this is a stretch of Old York Road that needs help, needs some revitalization. And unfortunately, when we were going through the process of hiring leasing brokers and trying to get the space leased, there was just no viable tenant. We had one massage parlor that was interested who wanted to pay their rent in cash, and that's just not the type of operation that we want to have in our establishment. So throughout that, we've started looking at this as a potential multifamily project. And as Tom had mentioned, we started off with a much more dense project. I think we were at 60 units. We scaled it back down after meeting with the neighbors to 48 units. We scaled it back again to 42, 36, and now we're at a number of 28 units where I believe Tom feels comfortable moving the process forward, as well as the near neighbors will have an input and a say in terms of landscaping and buffers and how the project is going to move forward. So with that being said, I mean, Michael Skolnick's our architect. He'll kind of walk through the plans of what we put together, and then we'll open it up to any questions.
Do you want to stand here and use this, or?
Yes, I'm Michael Skolnick with PZS Architects. Just to give you a quick overview of the project, as Denise mentioned, it's located on Old York Road, adjacent to Lee's Hoagies. There's a few views of the property looking up and down Old York Road. We are located within a half a mile of the Crestmont train station and immediately adjacent to a bus stop, so there is public transportation adjacent to our site. This is a view looking towards the building from across Old York Road. It has 28 one- and two-bedroom residential units and a total of 38 parking spaces. There are two driveways. One goes up into an enclosed or semi-enclosed parking area, and one goes down. As you can see, the site slopes significantly, so we're making use of those grades to essentially hide and utilize them for our parking areas. And then above that, this view shows 4 residential stories that front onto Old York Road above the parking. The next view is a view of the rear of the property. If you were perhaps standing in the residential properties that are behind the site, via the input of the neighbors and our near neighbor meetings, we lowered the height of the back of the building to 3 residential stories, and then we've put a green terrace above that would be landscaped to kind of lessen the scale as it relates to the residential properties behind. Just a view of the lower level parking area that includes 19 spaces. Again, the sort of first floor with lobby and upper level parking area, again another 19 spaces. This is a view of floors 2 through 4 that contain 8 one- and two-bedroom residential units. Each unit typically has 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen area, living dining combination area, and a balcony. And then the upper floor would have 4 units with that terrace I mentioned. I'll just skip over this one. Site plan, again, just the start of sort of some stormwater management that we know we'll have to accommodate on site. Shows a first pass at some of the green buffer areas that we would plant in order to separate ourselves from the adjacent properties, residential properties behind. This is just a quick map. We did a quick study of the other properties that could fall under the amendment that Denise will talk to you about, and that totals, I think, 16 properties as illustrated on the current map here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Denise to talk about the text amendment.
Are there any questions just with regard to the project, the building?
I'm sure we're going to have some questions, so I don't know if you want to just go, might as well go through the ordinance, and then we'll probably, sort of reserve the right to ask Mr. Skolnick and Mr. Lanskroner to,
Of course.
answer as a team.
Definitely. And interrupt at any time for that. So what I handed out to everyone is the ordinance amendment, as I mentioned, black line to show the changes that we made as a result of comments from, as I said, the township solicitor, the township manager, the township zoning officer, the county planning commission, and the township planning commission. And so as I go through, I'll note what those changes were. So basically, this would be an amendment to your existing MSH Main Street High Intensity Density District. And we were calling it the Old York Road Revitalization Modifications. So in order for this ordinance to apply, we set forth a number of eligibility requirements. If the property would meet the eligibility requirements, then there would be certain modifications that would be permitted for that particular property. And as Michael noted on the prior slide, we showed the other properties in the township which would meet these particular eligibility requirements. And as he mentioned, there's 16, but actually not each of those 16 could be developed individually. Some of them would have to be merged together in order to meet the eligibility requirements. So the first paragraph, called revitalization modifications, initially had the intent, and the reason that's crossed out is there was a comment that had been made, I believe by the county, which was to put that intent language in a separate section, which you'll find on page 3. So the language is the same, but we just moved it from this location to a different location. Another comment that had been made by the county was that we should call this both apartment/condominium building, which would be consistent with what's currently in your ordinance. We had originally just called it an apartment building, so we made that change as well. When we get to number 2, which is the eligibility standards, we had added in to make it clear, even though it is the Old York Road revitalization modification, just to make it clear that the properties would need to be on Old York Road. So that was the add on number 2. And as I mentioned, this section sets up the eligibility standards. And to go through each eligibility standard, the first requirement would be that the site, which could be comprised of one or more lots, so the site must have a minimum lot width of 150 feet and a maximum lot width of 200 feet on Old York Road. And the change that was made there is we initially had frontage, and we were suggested to change frontage to width. So it doesn't change the substantive meaning, but just change the wording. B is that the site has a minimum gross site area of 20,000 square feet. That was a recommendation, I believe, that came out of the Planning Commission meeting. C, the site is both within 25 feet of a SEPTA bus stop and 0.5 miles of the SEPTA train station. And the purpose of having that eligibility standard is that if this is going to be for workforce housing, for housing within the township, we wanted to make sure that it was transit-friendly and that it was close to public transportation. Section D, parcels immediately adjacent to the site and also within the same zoning district must contain active operating businesses. And the purpose of that is to identify properties that have been basically sitting either vacant or very underutilized on the Old York Road strip of property, and to try to revitalize those particular properties which for whatever reason have not been able to be redeveloped or leased for appropriate type tenants. Section E, the site has not been redeveloped within the past 5 years of submission of the land development application. And again, that's trying to limit the numbers of properties that would be subject to this. Again, really attempting to cause revitalization of properties as opposed to properties that potentially had been redeveloped more recently and wanted to take advantage of this. It may be that the board feels that that's not necessary, but we thought that that was just a helpful limiting factor. And then lastly, the site is not in compliance with applicable stormwater management requirements at the time the land development application is filed. Again, we're looking at properties that haven't been redeveloped over long periods of time, so they don't have current stormwater management facilities. They most likely don't have current landscaping on the site. So again, the whole point is to look for properties in the township that really do warrant revitalization, such as this property, and provide that they would meet the eligibility in order to receive these modifications. So moving on to Section 3, these are the actual modifications that would be permitted if you were to meet the eligibility requirements. And those are listed in sections A, B, C, and D. So section A deals with dimensional standards, and there are a few that would need to be adjusted in order for a project such as this to be able to proceed. The first, as I had mentioned earlier on, the density would need to be increased. Currently, the density for this site would be approximately 4 units. So as you could see, 4 units would not sustain the redevelopment ability for this property. 28 units approximately, as we said, per the 20,000 square feet, which is approximately the size of this property, is precisely what we're actually proposing here. The second dimensional standard modification would be for the height. The ordinance currently is 35-foot height, and the proposal would be for a 55-foot height. Third modification would be with regard to setback. And this one's a little bit of a gray area. The ordinance currently requires a building setback of 40 feet when you're adjacent to a residential parcel. And in fact, the building that we are proposing is set back 40 feet, so we would actually meet that requirement. But as Michael mentioned, there is a parking structure that's basically built into the grade. And the parking structure, which only comes up about 3 feet in one section of the rear of this property, is only set back 20 feet from the rear property line. So we were not certain whether the township would take the position that the parking structure is a building. So we wanted to make it clear that if you have a building, your building must maintain the 40-foot rear yard setback, but if you have a parking structure that's either below or above grade, that's permitted to be set back 20 feet. And then the fourth dimensional requirement has to do with the window area on the first floor, the ground floor. Currently, the ordinance would require 45% windows, and I think that that's probably more appropriate if you're talking about retail type use, but for residential type use, 45% windows would be a little too much window space. So we have changed that to require 25% windows on the ground floor. Moving on to section B, the design guidelines. The current ordinance has a whole host of design guidelines. There are only 2 that require some change. And actually, I should just mention, you saw that we crossed out number 4 in the dimensional standards, and that was after some discussion with the Planning Commission, and we re-looked at what the ordinance was. We can meet the yard setback, so we didn't need to have that requirement in there. Under the design guidelines, section 1007C deals with roofs, and while the ordinance does provide different options for roofs, it doesn't make it clear that you do not have to have a sloped roof. And so you had seen the design of the building, and so we would not be able to accommodate a sloped roof on a building such as this. It would obviously make the building taller. The second section, which has to do with trash storage, tanks, and loading, this particular section requires that you have certain areas outside the building and certain locations within the lot. And in this particular situation, we will have all of our loading and storage and trash all within the building, and so that particular section would not apply, and so we added the language that if you have all of those within the building, that particular section wouldn't apply. We had previously thought that we would need design guideline modifications, but again, in talking with the Planning Commission, they had questioned that, and when we went back and we looked at that very carefully, we believe that we can meet all of the facade guidelines under the current ordinance, so we've deleted that from our ordinance request. Moving on to C and parking, we do meet the ordinance requirements for parking. This particular section has to do with loading. This section actually gives the board flexibility on whether the loading is required or not required. We had talked with your township staff about this, and because it was just a slightly gray area, again, just to make it clear that this section would not apply because, as I mentioned, everything is within our building. And then lastly, the landscaping section, What we did is we actually added a section to make the landscaping more dense than what the ordinance would otherwise require. And the reason that we did that is, again, because we are going taller than what the ordinance would otherwise permit. We're more dense than what the ordinance would otherwise permit. And our parking structure, as I mentioned, is also closer to the property line. So we thought that it would be appropriate to require greater landscaping than would otherwise be required under the ordinance. So that takes care of section D. Moving on to the next page, number 4. Under additional requirements, this was a comment that came out of the, I believe the Planning Commission review or the county review, where it was a suggestion that for this type of project, as part of the land development application, the applicant should be required to submit renderings of what's being proposed. We agree that's a good idea, so we've added that language in number 4. Number 5 is a section called additional modifications, and this section gives the Board of Commissioners the ability, but not the requirement, to modify other terms of the ordinance that might be necessary, relevant in a particular application. It is not, it doesn't require that the board grant any further modifications, but it allows the applicant to request them. And should the board believe that they're appropriate in a particular given situation, this section would allow the board to make those modifications. It's somewhat similar to variance requests that would go to the zoning hearing board, but rather than sending it to the zoning hearing board, it would give your board the ability to make those same types of modifications. And then in section 2, as I stated earlier, this was the section that we had in the earlier section. We just moved it to a different section of the ordinance to set forth the intent, which is basically to create apartment building use to help revitalize and create workforce housing within the township. And the rest are just legalese that I'm sure you've seen before in other ordinance amendments. So, happy to answer any questions on the ordinance. Any questions of either David or Michael?
Very thorough, thank you. I'm sure we have a lot of questions.
Well, before we jump into the questions, I'd like to remind all of the board members, this is a motion to advertise. This is simply whether or not we want to put this on the December 14th agenda. If we do it on the December 14th agenda, it'll be a public hearing, and that will be the opportunity, that it'll be advertised. Any impacted individual, any of the neighboring property owners will have notice, so they will be here. If your questions are about whether or not you want to consider this on December 14th or whether or not you even want to advertise it, as the manager indicated, if you don't want to move forward with this, there's no right for them to have a hearing. You would just not move forward with it. If you want to have a full airing, allow the residents to come out and to allow the residents to be heard on this issue, then I would respectfully suggest that your questions are probably proper for the December 14th hearing and not for what is essentially a motion to advertise. Ms. Yarnoff's presentation gave you an idea of what this plan is. But the full airing of this has to happen after an advertised meeting where those affected property owners are given proper notice that this is being considered by the board. They have not tonight. So you're not ruling on it tonight, you're ruling on whether or not you just even want to put this on a future agenda.
So any questions should maybe just be framed to, if we are asking a substantive question, maybe to clarify rather than to...
Right. Right, and this is not in a situation where Ms. Yarnoff, her client, the clients will be open to questions from the public. This is not the hearing. This is not the hearing tonight. This is merely the motion to advertise. Should you wish to. You're under, again, remember, this isn't like a land development where they have an absolute right to be heard under the municipality's planning code. This is a purely discretionary act, and if you decide not to do anything with it, there's no timetable, there's no time when you have to act on this.
With that in mind, Commissioner
Yes. So Commissioner Hecker, whose ward it is in, you are for this idea, just just to give us a feeling?
So I think it would be appropriate for us to give this a fair and thorough review. And I think there are questions that we're all going to need to answer about what was presented here tonight in terms of the mechanism to address this. And I need to go back to the residents and inform them about where the discussion is at and have them understand what developments have taken place since we last spoke, which were to address many of the concerns that had been raised about parking and about the back of the building and the like. So I think I would be in favor of us going through that process, yes.
Thanks.
I have a question. Commissioner Hecker, did you say you were going to have another meeting with your residents prior to the public hearing?
Oh, most definitely, yes. There's a small group of residents who were consistently attending the 4 meetings that we had, mostly on Ferndale Avenue, who had significant questions, many of which were mentioned here tonight about the scale and scope of the project. And I think that's led to some changes that you've seen here tonight and will hear more thoroughly at the public hearing. But I would intend prior to the public hearing to invite the residents to sit down and talk about where things stand.
So that meeting that you're going to have with the residents prior to this meeting, will that include the applicant, their attorney, and staff, or?
Haven't thought that through, but all of the other meetings have included the applicant and members, his partners who've been working with him.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Comments? And Solicitor Clark will let me know if I'm out of bounds, but if I, just maybe a recommendation, I certainly, and I realize this wasn't the full presentation of your case. If you, when you do come back for the full hearing, and maybe this is your plan, but maybe the testimony of a planner so we can see how this fits into the broader scheme and complex of the zoning code, and to explain some of the other issues like density. And I know I did see the slide about which was sort of the not spot zoning slide that it fits to other things, but just to give that so the board can vet that a little more thoroughly and the residents can hopefully understand some of that too.
It's a good suggestion. Thanks.
Thank you. And Commissioner Klein.
Yeah, and along those lines, because I attended the Abington Planning Commission meeting and still couldn't really see it, but I think it's incumbent and a burden on the applicant to show the properties or the 16 properties that would be affected by this potential change and some statistics about those properties to fully analyze the overall effect of this potential change. So that was not clear when I was at the Planning Commission, nor was it clear tonight, and I understand that it shouldn't be, but that would be something that I think would be incumbent upon the applicant to put forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Klein. Commissioner Spiegel.
Just briefly, I'd like to reiterate that that's I think the number one piece of homework that we're all going to want to hear is how will this, what other properties throughout the township would be affected. I just want to say I actually had the privilege of attending a couple of the neighborhood meetings that Commissioner Hecker held, and I just not to inflate his ego, but the way that Commissioner Hecker approached this and really allowed for all the residents to directly question the applicant and get comprehensive answers was exceptional. So I applaud Commissioner Hecker's entire approach to this over the course of these years.
I did have one additional question. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Commissioner Hecker mentioned the off-site parcel for overflow parking. Is that, and I think I added it, but that's not so there's 38 on-site parking spaces, and then what was the amount of the overflow?
So the site does meet the ordinance requirement for parking, but as was mentioned, there were comments from neighbors of concerns about parking and obviously not wanting parking in the neighborhood. And so David had looked at another parcel that was nearby that could be used for overflow parking if it was necessary. I don't know that we've determined the number of spaces that could fit there. Do you know?
Yeah, you can get probably another 30 or so spaces, but the parcel has its own challenges right now. There's an environmental issue with it, so I'm still trying to work through that.
Okay, Okay, so that's not part of what's...
It's not part of this ordinance, no. That was really in response to some of the comments and concerns that the neighbors had. Like Denise said, the project fits within the parking requirements of the ordinance, so.
And that was also at a time when there was more density, and so there was more concern about the amount of parking meeting the ordinance requirements.
One else, I see Mr. Penical shuffling around back there.
I just had one comment.
By all means, please come
First
forward.
of all, I apologize for my appearance. I came from the soccer field. Thank you, Mr. Manfredi. There was one misconception, one misspeak this evening. This was presented to the Planning Commission. However, the Planning Commission elected not to make any formal recommendation. They'll do that at their November, I believe, 15th Planning Commission meeting. They wanted the board to have the opportunity to not only hear this at this committee level, but also as a Board of Commissioners meeting on the 9th, without any swayed testimony, recommendation being in hand from the Planning Commission. So once the board decides if you're going to set a hearing date, the Planning Commission will then come back on November 15th and give this board a formal recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Penical. Mr. Manfredi.
I guess my question is for Solicitor Clark in terms of procedures. Should it continue to go through the Planning Commission review before you decide whether or not you want to entertain the text amendment?
But if we approve a motion to advertise on the 9th, then it'll already be considered in December's meeting, therefore going to the Planning Commission after the 9th.
If you do that.
If we do that.
Yes.
If not, then I would assume that it would be pulled from the Planning Commission's agenda.
And just to kind of maybe speed that up, I mean, I get the sense that we're inclined to move forward, you know, based on the board commissioner's preference to both consider this and, in doing so, to advertise make a motion to advertise the
text
amendment for a hearing in the future, and I so move.
Second.
Seconded. Any other comments on the motion? Comments from the audience? Your name and address for the record, and 3 minutes with no obligation to use all of it.
I like that one. Laura Lehman, 1431 Bryant Lane. And so no, no, and no, and no, and no. This is a continuation of people who have a property and they want more than for it than what they have.
We were sort of, I don't know if you listened to the solicitor, but we weren't really discussing the merits of it. This evening, we had a presentation.
Well, so no, no, and no, I don't want you to advertise this because I believe we have a problem with people getting around the current system, which would require them to have a variance from the, and changing our whole ordinance. As Commissioner Klein said, we have not seen the other 16 properties, but there's nothing to propose there anyhow. So people wouldn't even really be able to vet that, even if you told the people around the other 16 properties, they wouldn't know what they were dealing with. So the problem here is, and I feel for the gentleman who, you know, overdeveloped a property that he had, and I was in real estate long enough to know that when you lower the price and the location sort themselves out. But as you saw on the Susquehanna and York Road property, when you keep the price up, it'll remain empty. So it is a matter of finances. And I feel for you because I overdeveloped my own house. When I go to sell it, I'll have the same regrets. But in light of that, we do not want to have all of these features affect the entire township in ways that we can't imagine and can't vet. You cannot make a decision on 16 other parcels that you have not seen. So thank you. I appreciate if you do not advertise.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments from the audience? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. It was unanimous. It's a committee meeting, so there's only a few of us on the committee.
I'm getting tired, I'm too backward. Aye.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, with the same procedural posture that we discussed this evening, we have CE4. This is whether to consider ordinance number 2147, zoning text amendment by Philadelphia Presbytery Homes. And again, as I mentioned, the same procedural posture as to whether we will consider this, and in so doing, move forward with a motion to advertise.
Just click on this.
I believe we have the applicant here this evening. Mr. Kerr, if you would, your name and address for the record.
Yes, good evening. My name's Bill Kerr. I'm an attorney with High Sports, 40 East Airy Street in Norristown. Here representing Presby Inspired Life this evening. Just start off, I'm going to try to do this presentation myself. I do have members of our team here to answer any questions, but just to expedite, it is 10 o'clock. It's for the fourth inning of the World Series, Game 7. So,
Who's winning?
Houston's leading 5-0, by the way. So, yeah. If anyone's interested. So we'll try to accelerate this, expedite this.
And I do want to say, Mr. Kerr, that so the board's familiar with the Rydell Park and Presby's Inspired Life staff. There are many interactions with them over the years, so the faces that they're typically used to seeing, Ms. Bavaria and Mr. Mast, they are actually away at the national conference, which is like their premier thing, so they could not be here this evening.
Yeah, that's correct. We were joking about that we're the B team here tonight, but we're going to give you an A team effort. So that's right, we're the B team too. Procedurally, we have a land development and reverse subdivision application pending, which was deemed complete as of October 1st. We have not been to the Planning Commission yet. We have gotten our review letter from the township's engineer, and in that review letter, there were certain zoning issues that were identified. So what we decided was we wanted to propose, rather than going to the zoning board, a text amendment, because like the previous project, this is a project that spans the old code and the new code. And from our perspective, most of I guess all of the zoning issues are really created by the fact that the project was initially approved under the old code, and now we're operating under the new code.
And while you're getting that set, Mr. Kerr, let me just also jump in, almost like Commissioner Hecker did, and say that this has been you've met with the neighbors several times on this, much feedback, and as you astutely noted, as Mr. Kerr just said, this is really a matter of being caught between I forget exactly how you phrased it, but the time zones of the zoning code, and I believe much of this relief, as Mr. Kerr will explain, is simply because of that difference. In fact, we had, in early days, represented to many of the neighbors, we thought it was to fit hand in glove with the existing zoning. It was designed around that. It was, actually the development has been started to much of a degree as far as the roads and the infrastructure. So, a lot of investment expectations are in play here, and this is what brings them, we would have never thought they were coming for this, but by the necessity of passage of time in the zoning code, that did happen. So without further ado, I'll shut
Okay. I'm going to flip. We have a full presentation here tonight, but given the hour, I'm going to jump through these. This is basically a little bit about Rydell Park, 43rd anniversary. It provides a full gamut of services and housing for seniors. It's owned and operated by Presby's Inspired Life, which has over 30 communities elsewhere. Their sort of mantra, their core mission is to provide exceptional living experience to folks 62 and older. This is the location of the project.
A little bit of history, and I'm actually just going to summarize this rather than having you read this. The history was that this was originally proposed and approved in 2005, 2006 as a single-family development of 85 homes for the Elliott Group. Elliott Group subsequently went belly up during the recession. Presby purchased this property back, and it's basically sat while the market cratered and recovered. 2014, actually, let me step back. There were significant improvements installed, however. The entire road bed was installed, and about half of the roadway has actually been paved with the base coat. We have a significant number amount of the utilities in. Most of the key utilities have been installed, primarily within the roadbed or adjacent to the roadbed. So there has been a pretty significant investment in the baseline configuration, which was a figure 8, and I'll get to that plan momentarily. What we're proposing, let me go back. What we're proposing now, instead of the 85 single homes, 85 twin and freestanding cottage homes. So there'll be some single family, some cottage. The prior plan was actually 85 separate lots that would be sold to the homeowners with some common open space areas. This proposal is actually to undo that entire subdivision. So it'll just be one single lot, which will be entirely owned by Presby, and then they will lease or admit folks as residents under their contracts that are applicable. The homes will be somewhere between 1,750 and 2,400 square feet. There'll be a modern clubhouse with a cocktail lounge and entertainment space, fitness center with fitness equipment, an outdoor swimming pool and entertainment area, an enclosed dog park, walking trails that walk through the area. There's some interesting topography and landscape features. And also, as part of one of the things that came out of the meetings with the neighbors and the township was that there's a desire to have a public trail that connects Old York Road and Susquehanna Road to the parkway. So that's part of the plan. This is essentially the site plan. As I indicated, the figure 8 road configuration is essentially the same road that was approved for the Elliott project. And again, what we've done is we've taken the lot lines out, consolidated some of the singles into twins, but essentially have worked with the same configuration. Just going to flip through these quickly. This shows a rendering of the clubhouse. Most of this is one-story architecture. This is the cocktail area. The community room essentially that's adjacent to that. This is the pool area with the clubhouse for the pool. Some of the units looking up and down the streets. This is a rendering of a 1,750 square foot twin cottage, again, one story. This is a twin cottage, a larger single cottage. And now I'm going to just jump over the text amendment and just get to the plan so you can understand the plan. Okay, this plan is actually the original plan that was approved for Elliott, and you can see the individual lots abutting the figure 8 configuration road. This is the existing conditions. You can see that the road, the initial, the lower bulb of the 8 has been installed with the connection back to York Road. That's been paved with the base course. The upper bulb of the 8 has been installed with the stone, basically the stone subsurface. Now, the zoning issues we have, the key zoning issues, let me step back. The key zoning issues relate to the riparian buffer and the steep slopes. The green that you see on this plan essentially shows you the riparian buffer as it's now defined by the new code. And where we have some encroachments are sort of in the top of the housing units, if you will, sort of at the top of the plan, and also at the road crossing to the lower left of the plan. Technically, under the zoning code, those are considered, even though the roads are in, those are considered riparian cover. So we impact those, and we would need zoning relief. In addition to the riparian, this isn't showing up as well as I would have hoped, but in addition to the riparian areas, I'm going to walk over to this plan. We have steep slope areas, which are essentially these dark shaded areas. You can't see that?
I think you need to use the mic.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Is there a wireless one, Nathan?
Yeah, I should have brought my pointer, but there are some steep slope areas that some of the units impact. Those steep slope areas, what did I just do?
Some of the cottages will have strobe lighting.
That's what happens at 10:12. System shuts down at the...
Always messing up technology.
At 10:12 p.m., that's what happens here. It goes dark. I thought it was over.
Okay, so we have some steep slope areas in here, and back in here to, on the back side of these units, which are impacted. And again, the riparian buffer area is down here, and then some of the areas right up in here that are impacted by the plan. And again, those are issues which were created in two fashions. One is that the riparian buffer is now defined in the new ordinance as riparian buffer. And a lot of the steep slopes, some of those existed, but some of those resulted from some of the site work that was done. So we have some man-made and natural steep slope areas. Okay, so that's the gist of our issues, and I'm going to try to go back here now to the ordinance, and we'll walk through the ordinance. You should have a copy of the ordinance that we submitted with our request for this evening attached to your agenda. And basically what we're proposing with the steep slopes, steep slope is defined with one sentence in the ordinance, and what we're proposing to add is some language, basically, just to paraphrase, is that any steep slope area that exceeds 15%, which was already subject to a land development or subdivision approval that was granted prior to the township, prior to this new zoning code, essentially doesn't constitute a steep slope. So basically, an existing steep slope previously approved by the township wouldn't fall within the definition of steep slope. So that's the first piece. Similarly, with the riparian corridor, the riparian corridor definition would not include improvements such as roads or streets that go to the full width of the roads and the streets, including sidewalks, curbs, retaining structures, utilities, and the head wall of any existing culvert structure. That would be excluded from the definition of riparian corridor, which would address those two issues, those major two issues for us. Also excluded will be stormwater management basins, including all basin slopes and berms, because there is a stormwater management basin that was created, that exists, that impacts the now riparian buffer area. We also have some of the public walkways and trails which are being created through the property to, again, to take advantage of the sort of the natural beauty, are in those riparian buffer areas. And so we would exclude from the definition any walkways or public trails that are 8 foot less in width, 8 feet or less in width, excuse me. Another tweak that we're proposing is that Presby typically shoots for target population of 62 years or older. There was the thought that with this type of project, because it is a single and twins, that there may be some folks that are in a slightly younger age, still considered seniors, that might be interested. So we're proposing that to amend the definition of senior housing from 62 down to 55 years of age or older. Presby has also seen situations where you'll have a couple with an adult child who lives with them. In many cases, that adult child may have some disability or physical needs, and that's why they're still living with the parents. So we're proposing that the limitation to one other adult be increased to 2 other adults. and that there be no dependent children. These would just be, again, these would be adults who would be living, there would be up to 3 adults living in any one of these units. The open space definition, this would just be to clarify. Some of our open space, actually, let me step back. The open space definition now says that it's visible from dwelling units and roadways. There's a little bit of ambiguity as to whether all of our open space is totally visible from dwelling units and roadways, so we would just like to tweak the language a bit to say that it's visible or partially visible from dwelling units, roadways, and then the sidewalks and recreational trails and walkways within the development. And then the last change would be, would reflect the fact that the senior neighborhood residential describes a senior community or senior housing as including single-family homes and twins. When you actually get to the appendices and the index, there's a chart there where single-family homes are clearly allowed. They get the Y as a yes, but the twin dwelling units, despite the fact that they're permitted in the definition, are not permitted in the SNR district. So this is just, in our view, this is really just a correction. It was just one of the details that got missed in the final draft of the ordinance. So again, that would change twin dwelling units from no in that matrix, in that chart, to a yes. And that's essentially the gist of the ordinance that we're proposing. And again, I have Tama Carey from Presby, I have Denny Wilhelm, who's our project manager, and I have Gary Tilford, who is the project engineer, who can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. Commissioner Gillespie.
I just want to commend you for hanging out till 10 o'clock, when you thought you were going to be right in the beginning.
I told my family I'd be home by 9. I think
Yeah,
this is an easy one.
well, won't do that again, will you?
No, I never will do that again.
So are we doing the same thing with this? We're just deciding if we're going to, okay. Okay.
So any questions of clarification or questions on anyone down this end? Any comments from the staff to add to that?
Commissioner Sanchez, if I may briefly.
There was one additional point I wanted to make that I forgot. We don't need, the zoning issues that I've mentioned is all the zoning relief that we would need. Our zoning density is well within the zoning requirements of the SNR district. I think we could go up to 104 units under the allowed density, and we're at 85. So we're well below the allowable number of units per the density requirements. So we're not looking for any relief there.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. Commissioner Spiegel.
I just wanted to, at the risk of repeating myself or drowning anyone in too much praise, as you know, you and I have worked very closely on this and met with neighbors who have been through quite a complex, one might even say tortured history with this property throughout the whole Elliott Builders Odyssey. And I just want to say to you, commend you on how you've handled this entire matter, the coordinating the meetings between the neighbors and the property owner. So well done. It's been a pleasure to work with you on this project.
Thank you for your help with that, Commissioner Klein as well, and Mr. Penical was instrumental in getting the word out. So thank all three of you. Anyone else? So I would make a motion that we do consider a text amendment here, and in so doing, we advertise a formal hearing of the Board of Commissioners on Thursday, December 14th, 2017, for the zoning text amendment known as proposed ordinance number 2147, filed by Philadelphia Presbytery Homes, for the proposed development of the Rydell Waters property, amending the zoning ordinance of the Township of Abington relating to provisions of the SNR Senior Neighborhood Residential, Riparian Corridor, Steep Slope, and Open Space Districts, and I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any comments from the audience?
Laura Lehman, 1431 Bryant Lane. Here we are again. Here we are again. And I have asked you for 12 years to keep a single page on each property. I'm betting you cannot find a page on this property, because if you did, you would find that they started out with 45 acres in the back I think it was. I'm doing this all from memory, so I might have some of it a little wrong. But they had 45 acres in the back. If you would allow them to build all their building up front, and then we'd have all that wonderful, beautiful green space, and it was on something of a slope there anyhow, and so wouldn't that be good? And everybody said, yes, that would be good, until nobody was looking. And then we sold off all that green space, and everybody said, well, you can't do that, you can't do that, and well, they did it, okay? And then Elliott went bankrupt, and they bought it back again after they cleared the ground so we could all yell at Elliott, okay? And then they bought it back again, and now they wanted more and more and more, and they got more and more and more, including now they would like to say that if you then approved something with the steep slope, you should continue to approve that, but not just for their property, right? I mean, I'm correct, aren't I? We're right back to the same thing. This is for other properties too. Am I right? Commissioner Sanchez, am I correct?
Could you just please complete your comments and maybe we'll address the
Well,
questions, but these are not
I need that
perfect.
answer in order to move forward, and we are supposed to be provided answers if those answers are available.
Full hearing and get your questions answered there, or research it in advance.
Well, do you know, Commissioner, whether or
I
not?
know, and I respectfully disagree with everything you've said so far, so just wrap it up.
Okay,
It's
so-
10:23 at night.
So it applies to other properties. Am I correct in that?
And Mr. Commissioner Sanchez, if I could remind the speaker who was commenting earlier this evening about the speaking rules and wanting to know what they are. The proper speaking rules is that if you have a question, you ask it, and then you sit down. And then the presiding officer will determine whether or not that question will be asked. So while the speaker wants certain speaking rules to be followed, this one, she does not. This is not a dialogue. It's not a back and forth. If she has a question, she can answer it, and then the presiding officer will determine whether or not it will be answered.
So while that was a lovely speech, we are trying to get a government that actually works. And when we have situations
Works
where
very well.
where it does not work when you do it that way, then it is important that people say it doesn't work, we need to fix that. So in order to go forward, I do need the answer to that question, and it's very simple and can be afforded. There is nothing in the speaking rules that requires you not to answer it. Okay? So again, I ask you not to do this. And Presby Inspired Life needs to spend more time on the people inside their facilities. Thank you.
Even though the comments weren't pertinent to tonight, I will answer the question that this applies to the Senior Neighborhood Residential District, which is only this property. And if Mr. Kerr wants to elaborate on that, he can feel free, but if not, he needn't, because I think we're going to vote on it.
You're changing the age.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No? Motion carries.
Okay, thank you for your attention this evening.
Thank you for
Thank you,
hanging
Mr.
out.
Kerr.
Can I? Oh.
I'm sorry. We must take comments on general matters
Yes, we
of
have
code
our-
enforcement and land development review.
Yeah.
Hearing none. Hearing none, I will make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. We're adjourned.
Can I just make a comment before everybody leaves? Just quick. Did I, Peggy didn't hear me.
Sorry, Commissioner Gillespie had one.
I just have a comment.
Okay.
Before everybody leaves. Before everybody leaves. After the budget meeting, there was something on social media that kind of insinuated that we as commissioners, made the budget what it is, and I just want everyone out there to know, it's the employees, it's the department heads, it's our finance department, it's our manager. We just vote. We just vote on it. So I just wanted you to know that, okay? That's it. Have a good night.
Cross the line there, folks.